Hi, Raven. First of all, I want to say how much I love your channel. It's gotten me through some dark times over the years. I think this counts as a glitch in the Matrix story, and I apologize in advance for the length, but I feel that certain details are necessary, because this one experience changed my entire outlook on life, and gave me hope in a time where I had none. I'm sharing this story because I think there are others who are suffering in their own lives and feeling hopeless right now, and I'm hoping that by sharing this, it might restore hope in your listeners who might need it. This was in 2017, and I had recently moved to a new city where I didn't live near any friends or family members. This was a particularly hard point in my life because I had just escaped an abusive marriage and was trying to start over fresh in a new place. I was driving a rusted 1997 forest green Chevy Cavalier at the time because I was broke and couldn't afford a better car. That car had been giving me trouble lately, and as long as I've had it, because it was 20 years old at this point and something seems to break down on it every other week. But it was all I could afford to drive at the time. I was driving on the highway on a crisp autumn day, and this day had been a particularly bad day. You know, one of those days where you've had enough and every little thing gets to you and everything seems to go wrong all at once. I began to feel my car start to sputter, and it started shaking as I tried to drive it. Oh, what now, I thought to myself. And as I mentioned, this was a particularly horrible day, where everything was going to go wrong all at once. And I just needed one single thing to go right in my life right then. So this was the worst time for anything to go wrong with my car. My bank account had a near $0 balance, and I could not afford to fix or replace any further issues with this car. After it started to sputter and vibrate a bit, I heard a loud popping noise that scared the life out of me, and my car was beginning to drive more slowly than usual, even though I was flooring the gas pedal. I panicked when I realized that I had to get off the highway and pull over to the side of the road immediately before I got into an accident. So, I put my emergency flashers on and steered my malfunctioning car to the side of the highway. I know it sounds strange, but it was like I was only able to pull my car over at the very last second, with not a second to spare before it died, and before I got into an accident. It was strange, and I cannot explain it, but in any event, I steered toward the side of the highway and turned my car off. This was the last thing I needed that day. I tried to start my car again and it just made a sputtering sound, and the ignition would not engage. I don't know much about cars, but I know that this isn't good, and that I was in trouble. I sat back in my seat and gave up trying to restart my car out of frustration after several failed attempts. What could I do now? I don't have the money to fix any more problems with this stupid car, and I can't afford a tow truck to tow me somewhere. I don't know anyone in the new town, and I felt very helpless and alone in this moment. I'd had enough that day, so I lost it and began to sob uncontrollably. After about a minute of this, I suddenly heard a voice telepathically say to me, "It's going to be okay." Now, I'm a very skeptical and logical person, and this didn't make any sense to me considering I could not pinpoint where this voice was coming from when I heard it inside my own head, and I was not the one saying it. No, I don't use drugs and I don't have any mental health issues, and I've never suffered from hallucinations before, in case you were wondering. I looked in my rearview mirror and immediately saw a red sedan pulling up behind me, which then stopped. I watched through my rearview mirror as a very tall man with shoulder-length blonde hair stepped out of the red car and approached mine. I don't know how to explain it, but there was something strangely familiar about this man. He was very tall and somehow felt different than other people, in a way that I cannot explain in words. He felt very loving, safe, and kind as he walked up to my driver's side window. He briefly made eye contact with me, and I could feel so much love and kindness emanating from him, even though I can't explain how. "Can you please pop your hood for me?" he asked me, without vocal words. I was taken aback and flummoxed when I realized he was speaking to me inside my head, telepathically, without moving his mouth at all. And even if he had been speaking out loud, I wouldn't have been able to hear him because I had not rolled my window down. Yet I understood every word he was saying. I popped the hood of my car and waited. "This will only take a minute," the kind man told me telepathically. Now, like I previously stated, I'm a very logical person and quite skeptical, but even I could not deny that this person was talking to me telepathically. So I popped the hood of my car and waited. I felt my car sway from side to side as he was doing something under the hood. I don't know what he was doing, though. What I can tell you is that it would take a lot of muscle power for a single man to make my car rock from side to side this much, and it rocked my body as he did. I had no idea what he was doing, since he was hiding behind the hood of my car, but he was very clearly doing something. After only a few seconds, maybe 10, he emerged and told me telepathically, "Can you please try and start your car again real quick?" So I turned my key in the ignition, and perhaps by some miracle, my car started immediately. I was in shock. Who was this man? How did he just fix my car that quickly and without any visible tools? He nodded and he closed the hood of my car and began to walk back to his car, after making brief eye contact with me again before he left. "I could just hug you," I exclaimed telepathically. I felt more grateful than I can express in words. He briefly held his hand up before he walked back to my car. "It's not necessary." And with that, he walked back to his car, and I was in shock. He didn't ask me for anything in return. He had just fixed my car for free for some reason, knew exactly what was wrong with it, and was talking to me telepathically. What the hell just happened? I felt like I might be going crazy until I realized that my previously broken down car was now inexplicably running perfect again without any mechanic fixing it, and I had objective, observable proof that I was not. I felt stunned, and I sat frozen in my car for what felt like forever before I looked in my rearview mirror again. And I know it sounds crazy, and if this had not actually happened to me, I wouldn't believe it. But his red car literally vanished right in front of my eyes. It disappeared right in front of me, and I watched it happen through my rearview mirror. In 1 second, the red car was behind me with him sitting inside of it, and the next second, it was just gone. I do not understand how this is possible, and I have given up trying to rationalize it logically to myself. I have no idea why this man helped me so generously, and for no known reason. But before I gathered myself and tried to merge back onto the highway, I heard that same voice say to me telepathically, "I told you it was going to be okay before," and I meant it. This was the same telepathic voice I heard before, and I felt paralyzed. I couldn't seem to move or drive away until I heard this person out. "I know that you don't remember me, but I remember you, and I want you to know that I have loved you forever, and I will love you forever, and you need to do nothing to deserve this love or reciprocate it. It just is. My love for you is endless, timeless, and perhaps I've loved you over many lifetimes." I was paralyzed, and I felt an overwhelming wave of energy take over that I can only describe as endless, unconditional love. I began to cry again, but they were good tears this time. I could not actually move my body no matter how hard I tried, but I distinctly remember trying to move my arms to roll my driver's side window down because I felt too hot. It was one of those old, non-automatic crank levers. But I could not actually move my arms to do it. I felt paralyzed, and as this person spoke to me telepathically, it felt like his words were resonating inside of my soul in a way that I cannot describe in words. I had never met this human being before once in my entire life, and I had no idea why he was acting like we knew each other. I was finally able to unfreeze for a moment and ask him telepathically, "I've never met you before. Are you an alien or something? Perhaps I'm an interdimensional alien human from the future. I'm someone who has loved you through many lives and timelines. Sorry that is confusing, and I understand that you can't remember me." What does that even mean? I wondered to myself and tried to ask him telepathically. What the hell is an interdimensional human alien from the future anyways? I promised that I was not high or drunk when this happened, but he didn't answer me or talk to me anymore. He was just gone. Again, I am a rational person and I wanted answers, but he never answered my questions, so I was just left wondering what the hell I had experienced. If I'd been making all this up in my own mind, my car wouldn't have been running and functional again after it broke down earlier, without any mechanical service. I have no way to logically explain what happened, why he seemed so familiar, or who this man was. In any event, I thought this experience was worth sharing. And, by the way, I never had any more problems with my car after this. I cannot logically explain away what happened to me, but I wanted to share it because it restored my hope during a time in my life where I had none. And I hope that by sharing it, it can do the same for others. Life gets so hard sometimes, and I think many of us feel like we're drowning in hopelessness, and we feel so alone sometimes, and maybe we can't imagine anyone existing out there who loves us without requiring anything from us in return. But this experience proved otherwise to me. This one experience completely changed my life. Please let me explain how. After this happened to me, I began to see things differently, and without knowing how or why. I was slower to anger and now have the psychic capacity to see things from other people's perspectives, in addition to my own, in a more expanded way that I wasn't able to before. I'm now able to empathically feel and psychically see what other people are feeling and thinking, as if their thoughts and feelings are my own. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but it was like after this happened to me, I saw and felt how we are all connected through time and space, and when you hurt another, you are actually hurting yourself, as we are all one. I can now see and feel how we are all connected to one another in a way that I can't explain. It's almost like time and space mean nothing, and love is the only thing that truly exists or matters. After this happened to me, I began to see connections all around me that I was never able to see before. Before this happened, for example, I would pass a broken down car on the side of the highway and not feel anything. I really didn't care much about the person with the broken down car. But after this happened, I now feel something I don't know how to describe in words. I feel really sad when I drive past someone else broken down on the side of the road, and now I don't feel okay unless I try to help them. I want to help others now, and have become a kinder, more compassionate person all around. I cannot ignore the suffering of other people and animals, even if I could do so in the past. This one experience has made me a better person, and I try to help others now whenever I can. Anyways, thank you for listening to my story. I know it was a bit long-winded, and I hope that everyone listening to this now feels less alone or hopeless, and more loved than before they heard it. No matter where or when you happen to be inside of this matrix, no matter who or where you are, know that you can make the world a better place by being more selfless and kind. And kindness never hurt anyone. I believe what I experienced was more like a flicker in the Matrix. I say it's a flicker because it was almost like I was flipping back and forth between parallel realities or something like that. The whole day started off when my alarm goes off at 4 a.m. I turn off the alarm, swing my legs over the side of the bed, and immediately snap my fingers, signaling my dogs to come with me to go outside. When I returned to our room, I was stunned to see my wife sleeping in our bed. The reason I was surprised is because my wife was working the graveyard shift at the hospital. I'm 1,000% sure that she was working that night, because I distinctly remember staying up late to text her, and she was not in bed when I fell asleep. I think she heard me moving around and woke up. I asked her if she left work early for some reason. She just stares blankly and says, "Babe, I was home with you all night last night." Freaking weird, obviously, but I'm still half asleep and need to get to work, so I shrug it off. Maybe I just misremembered. I was running late for work, so I'm like zooming and get to work and immediately jump out and hustle to the door, only to find the door locked. I proceeded to try every single door and they were all locked. I finally started to look around and I noticed that there were barely any cars. I call my boss and ask if we were closed for some reason, when he picks up and he says, "What are you talking about? You know we don't open until 5:30. I'm like, "Yeah, exactly, it's 5:30. Where is everyone?" He's like, "Look at your phone. It's 4:30. And when I look, he's correct. I'm positive that my alarm said 4 a.m. when I woke up. It uses geolocation to give you the right time zone, so I definitely didn't change it. So, what the hell? I don't have time to go all the way back home and all the way back, so I just recline in my car and wait. Once we finally open up, I bring my thermos of coffee, go inside, and get my assignment from my supervisor. I drop my coffee stuff at the workstation and realize I need to run back out to my car for headphones and chargers. I go grab my cables, specifically making sure I had both the black one and the white one since I needed both. I started walking back towards the building, and I don't get 10 feet from my car when I look down at the cords in my hand and realize I don't have the black one. I turn back to my car and walk the exact same path, checking the ground for figuring that I dropped it. It's nowhere to be found. I start shining my flashlight under cars and searching inside my own vehicle, and still nothing. I was really freaking bothered and annoyed by it, so I started searching the entire lot in expanding circular patterns. Absolutely nothing. Rationally, it can only be in 3 places: inside my car, around or under my car, or in the 10-step path that I took before turning around. There was nobody even near me or my car that might have picked it up. No animals or anything to run off with it. I never heard anything, and there was no wind. Like I said, I literally only walked 10 steps from my car. There is no rational explanation. It just literally vanished into the ether when I turned around. This happened a few months ago, and I still check the lot every morning to see if it's reemerged. Nothing so far. And, lastly, after I finally went back inside, I got a call from my wife. That was weird because she was sleeping when I left. I pick up and ask if anything is wrong. She says no, but then says that she's on her way home from work and wanted to call me to keep herself awake on the drive home. I'm like, what? I just saw you sleeping in our bed when I left. And she has no clue what I'm talking about. I legit thought that I was losing my mind. Hello everyone. I'm new to this sub, but I think I have an experience that fits here. I would post it in the paranormal sub, but I truly believe this to be a natural phenomena. Therefore, I thought it would fit in with this topic. I've had odd experiences ever since early childhood. I haven't really shared many on here, as many sound flat out insane, and I don't personally enjoy the rude backlash. However, I mostly visit odd subs anyway, and most of us weirdos are typically open-minded, kind, and respectful. Anyways, all I can say is that our reality is not truly what it seems. Today, I'll share with you my vortex experience. I was 18 at the time. I was an overall good kid, never drank until college, zero drugs. It was the summer before I started college and I was still living at my parents' home. This experience happened in my bathroom after I got out of the shower. I was standing, covered up with a towel on, in front of the counter vanity mirror brushing my hair. Next thing I know, I hear this whooshing sound, followed by rapid wind as well as felt dust. I look above myself in the mirror and I see what appears to be a miniature tornado whirling at a speed that I can't explain. It was about 2 feet tall, maybe a foot across, the widest part attached to the ceiling, and it appeared grayish or black. I was basically a deer in headlights then, as I kind of went in shock, as my mind was trying to figure out what the hell that thing was. I stood back and just looked up at it. I could feel the wind and breeze on my face, particles of dust. I was a curious kid and had already experienced my share of weird, paranormal, etc. So I proceeded to reach my hand up to touch it. As quickly as I did that, my hand literally got slapped down, and I heard this voice screaming in my head saying, "Don't do that." It was there for maybe another 5 seconds, and then gone. I was left absolutely at a loss regarding what had just happened. I couldn't piece together what it was. I wasn't scared. I didn't really have any emotion and was more in awe. I intuitively knew that that would have been very, very bad had I placed my hand in that thing. The voice I heard, the slap that I got, it had saved me. I believe that to be either my higher self, a helpful, multi-dimensional being. I'm not religious, so I don't subscribe to guardian angels, but you could classify it as such. Who knows? Maybe it was myself from another timeline helping myself. This happened in the summer of 2000. There was less about this topic back then than there is now. I've never experienced one since, and I'm grateful that I did. I truly believe that these things to be some sort of natural phenomena that our science cannot explain. Or science won't explain. Or, just flat out, the science that has been hidden or suppressed from us. In my heart, I believe that vortex to have been a portal to either a different time period, dimension, world, or alternate reality. Think of the Bermuda Triangle, much smaller scale though. That would be the most basic example that I can think of if you're trying to understand more of what I believe that thing to be. Anyways, I'll likely get ripped to shreds for sharing this as a liar or being delusional. Maybe I am delusional, but definitely not a liar. That was my honest experience. It will forever stay with me, and it has allowed me to continue to ask questions about what our reality actually is. I've never stopped asking questions, as well as seeking the truth, and all you folks should do the same. Thanks so much for reading. If you have any experience or thoughts with this phenomena personally, I'd love to hear your stories. And happy fall equinox. Oh, and again, I'll share some final details to assist. I was 18, female, no mental illness, 0 drugs or alcohol at that age. The location was Madison, Wisconsin, United States. I was, and am, very open to everything paranormal. I've always questioned our system, our reality, our world. The concept of the Matrix may not be so far off. I've always been sensitive. Let's leave it at that. I have a bit of a silly glitch that I wanted to share with you, as it was weird and I really don't know what to make of it. It's not scary at all, it's not even that eventful, and I'll try not to make it too long, but it's the only glitch that I've had happen to me, so I guess I'm a bit excited to share it. I've never experienced anything paranormal or anything, so this was a bit of a shock. To start it off, I guess I should explain the situation a little bit. I live in an apartment with my cousin, so it's just me and her that are ever here. She doesn't really bring anyone over, I don't bring people over, so there's no way that a third party is involved in what happened. I'm a bit of a water snob. I don't like tap water at all. The tap water here is too hard, and when I drink it, it gives me really bad tonsil stones, which is just gross. So, I don't drink it. I used to buy cases of water bottles, but I started feeling bad about all the plastic waste that I was producing, so I instead bought one of those big 5-gallon jugs from Walmart. It's one of the ones that you can bring back to Walmart and pay to refill with the Primo brand water, which is very heavily filtered. I also bought a water pump for it from Amazon for like $15, and I keep the jug in my room on my desk. It's been an absolute godsend for me, and it makes a lot less waste. So, I'm happy. My cousin isn't like me at all when it comes to this kind of stuff, and she makes fun of me for it, meaning she doesn't come into my room to use it or anything like that. I also have about 20 bottles of water in my room for the times when the big jug gets empty and I need to go to Walmart to fill it, just as a kind of temporary backup. Okay, that all put out there, here's the glitch. Last week, I was homesick for most of the week. I caught a bug that thankfully was not COVID, but it was enough to knock me down for 3 days. I'm grateful that I had the sick time and was able to stay home because I was miserable. During this time, I ended up drinking a lot of water, because I was feeling non-stop thirsty. Unfortunately, on day 2 of me being sick, I ended up drinking the last of my 5 gallons. Feeling like I wasn't going to go to Walmart to refill it yet, because I didn't think I would be able to carry it out of the store full without falling over. I took the pump off, replaced the cap on the bottle, and pulled my case of water bottles out from under my desk so that I had them easily accessible. I got through 1 or 2 of those bottles before passing out for the night. Here's where the glitch happened, and I honestly cannot explain it. When I woke up the next morning, I was groggy, a bit out of it, but I got up and went to the bathroom to do my routine. When I came out, I reached for a bottle of water, which was sitting on my desk right by my 5-gallon jug, but paused. The jug that was empty just the night prior was now about a third of the way full. I swear I stared at it for like 5 minutes, trying to piece together the whole situation. I know it was empty. I had tilted it to suck all the water out of it with the pump, and it was completely dry. I had taken the pump off to put it on the USB charger, which I only do when it's empty. Yet it was sitting there in front of me with close to 2 gallons left. The pump was still plugged in, and the cap was still on it. So it wasn't like I just imagined taking it off when it was empty. A few things to kind of cover the logical possibilities. First, I know for a fact that it was completely empty. It's obvious when it's empty. The bottle weighs nothing. You can see the water level as the plastic is clear with a slight blue tint. Plus, like I mentioned, I had tilted it to get the last of the water out. If it still had 2-ish gallons in it when I was using it, I would not have been able to do that. One thought that I had was maybe my cousin had refilled it, but that wouldn't make sense. When you refill it, you pay for the full 5 gallons. So for her to sneak into my room while I'm asleep, grab the water jug, take it to Walmart, pay for 5 gallons of water, and then fill it with 2, and then sneak it back into my room without me noticing, it just doesn't work. The water that was in it was definitely not tap water. It was absolutely the filtered water that comes from the Primo machines. I tested it with my little ppm meter that I have from back when I had a 0 water pitcher, which got broken when we moved in, and the meter read that it was 12, versus the couple hundred ppm that comes from the sink. I did this because I also had that thought that maybe she'd filled it with the sink water just to mess with me. I also asked her if she'd filled it, and she told me that she hadn't. If she was playing a prank, I feel like she would have fessed up to it. Otherwise, there was no reward for the risk. So, by the end of this, I had 2 gallons of water in my jug, with no way for it to have been filled. But yet it was. And like I said, this isn't scary at all, I know. Just really weird, and I really cannot explain it. If anyone has any thoughts, I would love to hear them. Because I'm at a point where I'm 99% certain that this is a glitch in the Matrix. Albeit a rather boring one. Hi, Raven. A little background story. This glitch happened exactly at the moment when it had to happen. To prove to my mom that glitches are real, and that they do happen. But also to prove to myself once again that when you wish for something with a purpose, it comes true. And this follows me all my life. Another interesting thing about glitches, which I have noticed in others too, when I watch videos about glitches, they happen within a short time. It doesn't have to be a rule, of course, and many times it's not. The most interesting thing that led to this glitch was that this time, I wanted a slightly different glitch, considering that, so far, I'd only had those glitches with things disappearing and magically reappearing, or just disappearing things that were supposed to be in a certain place. I've also had those with duplication as well, and some of loss of time with no memory of what happened during the loss of time. First, I wanted a glitch in which I could see myself, as many people experience in your story. But then I think a little bit and asked myself if I really wanted to. I was afraid that it would be too scary. Then, I just wanted a different glitch. But I was imagining glitches with my mom. And here is the glitch. That day I lost my credit card, and was told that the card was found and was waiting for me in a store. I told my daughter that I'd lost the card and that they found it, but not to tell anything to Grandma, my mom, so that Grandma doesn't get angry because I lost hers a month ago and just got a new one. After that, and 2 hours had passed, I was eating in the kitchen, my daughter was in her room, and Grandma was on the balcony. And suddenly, my mom enters the living room, which is connected to the kitchen, and asks, "Did you lose your card again?" I laugh and ask her how she knows, believing that my daughter told her because she likes to betray everyone in such situations. And my mom says, "Just now, you shouted to her in her room asking if she saw your card." I'm looking at her and I could not believe that this glitch that has happened to others just happened. Because I knew right away that it was a glitch. Because I didn't say a word when I was eating, and the card wasn't even on my mind. I told my mom that I didn't say anything, and my mom asked me, "You're joking with me, right?" I started laughing and told her, "You see, that's your glitch now." Mom didn't believe it, and another hour later she thought that me and my daughter were joking because, as she said, she could clearly hear me shouting to her in another room, and that my daughter said that she hadn't seen it. What is also very interesting in that whole story, my mom is quite deaf, and the balcony door was closed. There was no way that she would have heard me, even if I shouted, and even less heard my daughter from the other room. Which, by the way, is on the other side of the apartment. This glitch happened about several years ago where I live in Central Texas. Almost every Sunday after church, my family would eat at TGI Fridays. On one of these Sundays, we happened to see our friend Jesse, who sometimes attended our church, sitting at the bar and eating. We tried to get his attention by calling out to him, but it was his friend sitting next to him that finally nudged him and told him we were calling him. Jesse started walking over to us, and it was only when he was about 20 feet away that I realized it wasn't actually him. I mean, it could have been his twin, because he had to be so close for me to see that it wasn't exactly him. Of course, I was very embarrassed and I apologized, telling him that he looked so much like our friend Jesse. For the record, Jesse has his own look. Tall, thin, broad shoulders, a widow's peak, and the guy was even wearing a green and white striped shirt, such that our friend often wore. But that's not the weirdest part. The weirdest part is this. He was especially confused because, as he had said, my name is Jesse. Another strange event happened sometime later at that very same TGI Fridays. I spotted a hostess that I immediately and excitedly began to wave to. She'd been a friend, or at least a good acquaintance, with whom I'd hit it off. But she didn't notice me, so I stopped waving. And then I realized I couldn't really tell how I knew her. I didn't know her name, I didn't recall having ever met her, but for some reason, my initial glimpse of her brought out that reaction. Well, it turned out that she was a server, not a hostess, and she ended up being our server. I wasn't going to pretend that I knew her anymore and make a fool of myself, so I sat patiently while she took our drink orders. She took my dad's drink order first, and then she turned to me. Her eyes immediately got huge, and she said, "I know you. How do I know you?" She had the very same intense reaction that I'd had to seeing her earlier. But when we went over every possible way that we could have met, there was no way that our paths had crossed. We covered all bases. We did end up becoming Facebook friends that day, just from having felt such a strong connection. I started joking with friends about there being something mystical at this particular TGI Fridays. Because of this double Jesse incident, I started calling it Doppelganger Fridays. My BFF and I went there one night specifically, just to see if we could spot anyone else's doppelganger. Before I even got there, my BFF immediately saw a coworker of ours with his wife and kids. It took her a bit to realize it wasn't him, but it looked just like him. Red hair, sunglasses on his head, and his two boys were that same age that our coworker's kids are. And it's not quite as strange as our other two stories, I guess, but I still wonder about this particular restaurant. I followed this sub for years, and have had different instances happen, but this time I actually have physical proof of the glitch, and I wanted to share my story. So, I want to give some context first. I'm a caregiver for a 100-year-old woman. I live with her part-time and I manage her care. One day a few weeks ago, she told me to call 911 because she was having a lot of chest pains. She has a history of heart attacks. I called 911 and EMTs showed up within minutes. Now here comes the glitchy part. I let them in and one man specifically comes to talk to me about her medical history, if she has any family, etc. He's asking me who I am in relation to her, and I'm explaining to him that I'm her caregiver. While I'm having this interaction with him, I notice that his eyes are super intense. It's like we have this silent understanding that we're almost going through the motions, and like we are in some kind of matrix or something. It's really hard to explain. He had a specific type of mustache that really grabbed my attention as well. Think slight handlebar. Meanwhile, the other EMTs are taking my client's vitals and telling me that everything looks okay. That they said she's basically being dramatic. Okay, so here's the meat of the story. The EMT that I'd been talking to asked to speak to my client daughter on the phone. I make the call and talk to the daughter. As I'm about to give the phone to the gentleman, I for some reason just get super nervous and I say, okay, here's Officer Smith. Not the real name. I was reading his name on his uniform as I spoke since I realized with all the commotion, I hadn't even gotten his name. The EMT then says, yes, Michael Smith. Soon after this, the EMTs leave and head home. I get my client tucked into bed safely, and I start finishing up my duties for the week. Her other caregiver was coming to relieve me for the weekend in a few hours. One of the duties that I do before I leave is to check the voicemail, and also look at the missed calls in case I missed something important. My client had been in the hospital a few days prior, so I had been spending a lot of time there. So I was paying close attention to the missed calls for the week. As I'm scrolling through the missed calls, I realized that the name Michael Smith is on the caller ID 2 days before this incident at 11 or so in the morning. I had such an out-of-body, eerie feeling. The only way I could make sense of it was that possibly he was calling the house line for fundraising reasons, but that also doesn't really make sense, because why would it be his name like it was his personal line? To note, his name is not really Michael Smith, obviously. I've changed the name for my privacy and his privacy, but the name was not super common. I just can't make sense of it. Lastly, I did get a picture of the caller ID because it was almost unbelievable when I saw it. I knew that I needed proof. Even though I had the picture on my phone, I went and tried to look at the missing calls again because I was still doubting what I saw. When I went back to the caller ID, that call was not there anymore. It's possible that I accidentally deleted it, but it just seems strange. I would appreciate any thoughts or theories, because I'm still a little freaked out. everyone. I have to share something bizarre that happened to me a while ago, and it's been eating at me ever since. A bit of background about me. I'm a 31-year-old guy living in the southeast side of Norway, and I work as a web developer. My daily routine has been pretty much the same for the past 3 years. I walk to and from work, usually arriving at the office around 05:30 and leaving around 1400 hours. So, here's where things get weird. It was a typical early morning walk to work. I was strolling along the roads on the outskirts of my city, plugged into my tunes, and soaking in the serene beauty of the autumn-winter night sky. My route is pretty straightforward. A dimly lit road with a sidewalk on each side. I usually stick to the left sidewalk out of habit. Now, I love to gaze at the stars and moon during my walk, especially in the crisp winter air. However, this particular morning took a turn for the strange when my Samsung Galaxy Buds started acting up, losing connection with my phone sporadically. I fiddled with them for a bit, but eventually gave up, attributing the issue to a dead battery. And that's when I noticed it. The air was thick, with a static charge, reminiscent of the atmosphere just before a thunderstorm. Yet the sky was completely clear. I tried to shake it off and continued my walk, but then the hairs on my arms started to stand on end, and an intense ringing assaulted my ears. I thought maybe I was having a panic attack. They've hit me a few times in the past, so I employed my usual coping techniques. Unfortunately, they were to no avail. In a growing state of alarm, I scanned my surroundings only to realize that, somehow, impossibly, I was now on the right sidewalk. I hadn't crossed the road. I was sure of it. An eerie silence enveloped everything. No wind, no city sounds, just nothing. Even the moon seemed to betray me, showing a phase indicating a week had mysteriously passed. I frantically checked my phone, and it was dead. My watch had also stopped ticking. The distant city lights, which should have been visible, were enveloped in unsettling darkness. Now, I was genuinely freaking out. I closed my eyes, desperately trying to rationalize the impossible events unfolding around me. My heart raced as the static electricity and the ringing returned. Fearfully, I opened my eyes, and I was back on the left side of the road. The static and ringing had ceased. The moon was back to its correct phase, and the distant city lights twinkled reassuringly. My phone and watch were functioning as if nothing had even happened. And, apparently, only a few minutes had passed. I sprinted the remaining 2.4 kilometers to work, my mind whirling with the inexplicable occurrence. I didn't share this with anyone until now, but there is one more thing. I remembered that my exercise app was running on my phone during the incident. When I checked it upon reaching work, I noticed that the GPS lost track of me precisely at the time of the incident. I can't explain what happened, and maybe the phone's power loss could account for the GPS issue, but still. Has anyone experienced anything like this before? I'm at a loss, and would love to hear your thoughts or similar experiences. Okay, so I've never been particularly convinced that we are living in a simulation, but I came across this topic months ago, and it has fascinated me ever since. A few months ago, I had a bit of a strange experience that I still cannot explain, and I figured I would share it here, so here goes. For some context, I do not do any drugs, and I was definitely not drunk, and I'm not someone who enjoys getting drunk. At most, I drank a glass of wine with dinner, but This happened hours after I drank my glass of wine that night, and even if it wasn't, I was still definitely not drunk. So, a few months ago, I, 21, female, was preparing for a trip to Disney World. I had done some shopping at Target before the trip, and one of the things I had bought was two, keep that in mind, containers of body scrub to have a little self-care day on the trip. I bought these weeks before leaving for the trip. I set them both on my desk and left them there. Fast forward to the day of the flight, and I was packing my suitcase. I went to go grab the body scrubs, but only one of them was there. I could have sworn that I bought two of them, and I put them both in the same place. I looked under my desk to see if it fell, but it wasn't there. So, I figured maybe it was hiding under something. My desk is kind of messy after all. So I tore apart my desk, but still, no body scrub. I even went downstairs to see if I left it there for whatever reason, but it wasn't there either. Let me tell you, I looked every possible place that it could have been. I'm not sure how it could have happened that one body scrub was exactly where I knew I had left it, but the other one was literally nowhere to be found. This wasn't like a normal case of losing something, because normally when we lose something, it turns up eventually in a place that makes sense. I swear on my life, I looked every possible place this body scrub could have ended up, but it's almost like it vanished into thin air. Eventually, I gave up and accepted that I would only be able to take one of my body scrubs to Orlando with me. It wasn't a huge deal, just annoying that I found one of the body scrubs but not the other, even though, again, they were both on my desk. A few hours later, around 1 a.m., I was still awake. I'm a night owl, so this is completely normal for me. And I found myself thinking about that dang body scrub again. I decided that it wouldn't hurt to look one more time. So, I turned my light on and tore apart my desk again. Still no body scrub to be found. The other one was packed in my suitcase, ready to go to Orlando with me, but the second one, for all I knew, it grew legs and walked away. Eventually, I just accepted defeat, knowing that I should probably go to bed soon so I could get some sleep before hopping on the plane. Continuing to look probably would have just made me more frustrated. I'm a pretty rational person, and I'm not one to come to conclusions like this, but I had no other explanation. I was almost convinced that I had somehow tricked myself into thinking I bought two body scrubs at Target that day, but I really only bought the one. I couldn't think of anything else that could have happened. If it had fallen off my desk, I would have found it under my desk. And it's not like any of my family members would have just gone into my room and stolen it because, well, they just wouldn't do that. To this day, I still have not found that second container of body scrub, and I still don't know what happened to it. But this was the strangest experience of losing something that I've ever had. That's for sure. This happened in my apartment. I'm 30, male, and I live alone, and it happened yesterday, starting in the early afternoon during my work-from-home lunch. I'll be as brief as possible. I make my own spray air freshener, not unlike Febreze. And because I like my home to smell good and can make scents not typically found in stores like Walmart or Target, I have a modest variety of different fragrance oil scents, vanilla, cinnamon, bergamot, teak, etc., held in 20-ounce bottles, that I use to switch things up when I get tired of any particular smell. The recipe for the air freshener spray is pretty simple. Take a dollar store spray bottle, add 3 parts cleaning alcohol, distilled water, or vodka to 1 part fragrance oil of your choice. Tap water will go rancid. Then shake and it's ready to spray. I decided to make a new batch of spray, cinnamon. In my kitchen, I thoroughly cleaned out the spray bottle with soap and hot water in the sink, and then walked to my closet to grab the cinnamon fragrance oil and alcohol. When I picked up the fragrance bottle, it was 3/4 empty. Not surprising, since I use this fragrance often and the amount remaining felt about right. No issues so far. I then walked about 20 feet back to the kitchen to continue making the batch. I decided to just kill the fragrance bottle since it was almost gone anyways. So I poured the entire contents in the neck of the spray bottle. I shook the fragrance liquid to last drop since the fragrance oil is relatively expensive, $20 per bottle, and then threw the empty container into my trash bin. I added the alcohol into the spray bottle to complete the mixture, screwed the spray nozzle on, and I had a lovely new bottle of fragrance that I then sprayed around my home. And now, the glitch. Lounging in my living room about 5 hours later, I was thirsty and walked from my couch to the kitchen to get a glass of water, when I noticed a large plastic cup from my NutriBullet next to the sink that I did not remember leaving out. In the cup, I noticed about half an inch of viscous, oily, slightly golden yellowish liquid that did not look like anything I would drink or have in my fridge. I was immediately puzzled and instinctively smelled it to try to identify this strange liquid. To my shock and alarm, it was cinnamon fragrance oil. Coincidentally, the volume of oil was virtually identical to the amount that I had used for my mixture. Without thinking, I immediately dumped the liquid down the drain and began rinsing out the NutriBullet cup, only to realize the oil and scent had seeped so deep into the plastic and was coating the interior that I wouldn't be able to save the cup. I decided to just toss it into the trash to avoid the risk of ingesting fragrance oil. But all kinds of alarm bells are going off in my head at this point. I feel like I'm going insane. Not only did I not pour fragrance oil into a cup that I frequently drink from, something I would never do, but I distinctly remember the exact sequence I described above, starting with cleaning out the spray bottle in preparation for a new batch. And I used up all of the cinnamon fragrance oil that I own in the batch that I made. The entire process took approximately 3 to 4 minutes at the most, and I did it all in one linear sequence. A while later, still thoroughly puzzled and questioning my sanity, I went back to the kitchen and pulled the NutriBullet cup to inspect it again. The unmistakable smell of cinnamon fragrance oil is still there. Inexplicably, there had indeed been fragrance oil in my drinking cup. I know that this is a relatively mundane glitch for this sub, but I have no idea how fragrance oil, that I no longer had because I had just used the last of it, could have possibly materialized in a drinking cup on my counter. I called my brother and he told me to check for carbon monoxide in my apartment. I don't know what's real anymore. Help? So, this just happened to me a few weeks ago, and I finally got the chance to sit down and write this out. I've been going on some dates here and there, trying to find someone to spend the holidays with. I matched with this one guy and we started talking pretty quickly. He was really nice and funny, and his quips and way of talking actually reminded me of myself. I thought that we jived really well, so when he asked for the first date, I was pretty excited. Onward to the first date, which was a little over a month ago. We had a great time. He told me about how he worked at some big data company, like he worked on servers or something for them. He joked about his family because he was smack dab in the middle of a whopping 9 kids, but talked about how he didn't want kids. I don't either, so I thought that that was a relief. He talked about where he lived and how he had a weird neighbor, and again, made a long joke about how he acts like he's undercover and made up this whole story about him. He told me about one of his favorite hobbies, which was resin work. He made custom dice, containers, vases, all sorts of things. In fact, he showed me a keychain that he'd made. Overall, it was a great night, and I was already preparing for a second date with him. We continued talking, and we had a date planned, but then I got sick, so we had to postpone. We finally got to have our second date, and that's when things got weird. We went to a restaurant that I had never been to, but when I walked in, I immediately got this feeling of déjà vu. At first I thought, okay, no big deal, that's happened before, and just proceeded to find my date in the crowd. He greeted me and I made my way over to the table. Just like our first date, he complimented my outfit and made the same cheesy line of it matching my eyes. But then, our conversation was the same from our first date, nearly word for word. He asked me how my day went, specifically with one of my classes. I'm taking an optional course for my work, which he also asked me on our first date. Then he asked me more about my job, the same questions that he'd asked before. I recall that because I hate having to repeat myself, like when people aren't listening, so normally repeating something like that would annoy me, but he seems to genuinely be asking, like we had never mentioned it before. So I asked about his job, phrasing it like I already knew, because I did. And I asked, "You work on data servers, right?" He looked at me curiously, almost as if he was trying to remember if he told me, but the way that he explained it was the exact same. He told me about his siblings, telling me the same things he told me the first time. Our conversation turned to hobbies and free time, and he mentioned his resin work, and once again pulled out his keychain to show me. It was actually really unsettling at the time, and it made me think that maybe I'd had a really lucid dream or something. But he even mentioned this being our second date, so this was definitely happening for a second time. I even tried to see if I could sway the conversation, and I asked about the restaurant since I wasn't familiar with it, but he would then end up asking me questions from our first date, and it would go right back to where we were. It was such a weird feeling, and I couldn't understand what was happening. I eventually stopped trying to fight it, and just went along with the night, pretending like I had never heard the things that he was telling me, and like I'd never told him the things I did that night. When we finished for the night, he walked me to my car and we talked about getting together again, and I agreed. He was still a great guy, but that date was just odd. We've been talking ever since, and he suggested another date. This time not at a restaurant, so I'm hoping that it won't happen a third time. But the whole date still confounds me, and I have no explanation for it. I haven't heard of whole days or conversations being repeated in that sense, but it definitely seems like a glitch, or a replay in reality. I'll let you know if our third date repeats, because I may have to ask him about it too. And hopefully it confirms that I'm not crazy. Hello. I submitted to you a story about 5 months ago about my town's shopping schedule and the signal tower on my way to my old high school and current evening school. Yes, you did. And I read it. The first event goes as such, for a little refresher. There was a signal tower near my town's second cemetery and the second mass grave memorial. The tower had a steady red light that you could see only through the night. When asked, my sister, her friends, classmates, and parents say that it has always been there. But for me, it hadn't. It appeared in April of 2023, and onwards. At first, I thought something bad might have happened to me on my trip to Italy. Which brings us to why I'm writing to you again. The tower has now disappeared. September of 2023 up to now, November 22nd, 2023, the tower isn't there. I've passed that road 5 times by now, and it was all between dusk and nighttime. There's no sign of it anywhere. I've asked my family and my sister's friend, and they cannot seem to recall such a tower ever existing. I haven't asked my classmates yet because I'm a bit scared they might think I'm losing it. And, just to add fuel to the fire, this school year feels wrong. Classes felt wrong. Relationships between my classmates felt wrong, and the behavior of the teachers are a bit odd. I have a teacher who I have struggled with being able to keep up and understanding his lessons, and his behavior towards me when I try to participate or ask questions about the classes. And the facial expressions he's making, and even some comments, have made me feel as if I'm dumb. I have dyslexia and ADHD, and his lessons and way of teaching make them flare up in such an annoying way. Last year, his aura was pine green, but this year his aura was different. Most days it was grayish black. Until today, his aura had changed to a violet pink. To add something a bit more, the whole wrongness that I feel, I'm not the only one. My dad and my sister feel it too. Dad was the first to voice it one afternoon as we were driving to school, and he complained about how this school year feels so wrong. My sister agreed, but couldn't pinpoint why. Then, I added that I too felt that it was wrong and said that my new classroom feels unbalanced, and that our dynamic as a class is off in comparison to last year's. No one new was added. Last year it felt like a small family, but now I sense something cold and dark. The atmosphere is tense with some classmates, and my communication with them feels far harder to achieve, and for conversation to flow. It's been months. Another teachers of ours noted how we all bonded so quickly as a class, and the new 2nd grade, we are the 3rd grade now, hasn't come close like we had. Yes, I sense the bond between my classmates. It does feel like a family, but the dark, cold, and tense feeling is there looming over us. I hear passive-aggressive comments from classmates toward each other, or about classmates when they're not in the room, and it breathes an air of distrust in me. And to tie everything in a nice little bow, I sensed the same disconnect and dark energy in last year's 3rd grade, when they were in the very same classroom as we are now, last year. A few of the odd things that have happened since my post about the tower are surviving COVID for the 2nd time, me too, experiencing an earthquake that felt like an explosion, that pushed me from sitting on my bed to laying down on it, and with its force, I hit my head on the wall. And then throughout the day, we had multiple smaller earthquakes. There have been multiple wildfires surrounding my area, and yet nothing getting harmed. Surviving a Category 5 storm while traveling across my country, which later turned into a tornado that destroyed my dad's hometown, and flooded my country with water that could fill the Sahara Desert up to 25%. Then, a week later after the storm turned tornado, at night my sister and I, along with our dad, were awakened by the sound and flashing of lights and thunder. A cyclone and storm were hitting our town at 3 a.m. The sky was lit up violet and blue as we rushed to gather the laundry and seal the windows. The next day when I referred to the events, no one knew what we were talking about. I was almost run over by a car, but my sister pulled me aside. There was an explosion that happened in my city for what reason nobody knows. And we had the northern lights appear over my country. Something that hasn't happened before. All of these oddities and wrongness, yet at the same time, in some other areas of everyday life, the feeling of rightness. It has me wondering if I changed timelines again. Did I return to an old timeline? So, what do I make of these events? My only theory is that somehow any of these events killed me, returned me, or got me to an old timeline. And I say old timeline because it feels as if I have been here before. Events that I referred to my parents in the past, and they had no memory of happening, are now being told as if they are a staple family story. And when I try to take credit for reminding them of said event, I'm being corrected as if they always knew about it. So, any thoughts? So, I'm not sure if this qualifies, but it's been almost a decade since this began and I still have no explanation. In my early 20s, I went out dancing a lot, and I knew a lot of people this way as it's a pretty small town/community. For this reason, I gave people rides home often. Like I would run into them doing errands even, but always people I knew or had contact info for. Well, this one morning I'm giving my friend Vince a ride from one end of town to the other. He pulls out a green/purple crystal ball. I think fluorite, maybe. And he tells me laughingly that I must have lost my marble. I explained that it wasn't mine, though beautiful, and that someone must have dropped it when they got a ride home. So I posted about it on social media, and I texted all the friends that I'd recently given rides to. Other people thought it was weird, but no one ever claimed it. Fast forward a few months or so, and I'm deep cleaning the same car, and I find a matching crystal orb. It's slightly different coloration, but when I compared it to the other, they seemed to clearly be a set. So I reached out and posted it again, with a picture of the second. Again, they go unclaimed. I had just accepted that I must have forgotten someone or lost track of them or something, and I chalked it up to just one of those things. Until about a year ago. I've moved 5 hours away to a new city, and no one ever visited our place. Like, I could list on one hand probably how many had. Well, I had the 2 other crystal orbs on the shelf in the living room, and was looking at them one day. I picked up the closest one and thought something about it was odd. It seemed smaller, and a different green, and I couldn't remember ever noticing the unique pattern on one part of it. I was about to write myself off as having a bad memory, until I noticed that there were 2 identical ones still on the shelf. I asked my boyfriend when he got home about it. We texted the few people who had ever been in our apartment, asked family and friends if it had been a gift that we didn't remember, and nothing. So 3 of these things just appeared. 2 in my car close together, which was totaled before I even moved, and 1 later in my apartment in a new city. If the situation were different, I might think it's an ongoing joke or something. But for that long? Also, I looked up these crystals, and they aren't exactly cheap, so it'd be a weird game to play. Tell me what you think, or if you have an explanation, because I'd love to hear them. Here are a couple of my more extreme glitch stories. I use them as examples in my book, The Dream That Dreams the Dreamer, where I try to explain what I believe this reality is. One night, I was up late, but that's normal for me because I'm a night person. I don't remember what I was doing, but I remember looking at the time, and that it was 4 a.m., and I was hungry. I got up and went to make myself something to eat. There's a window next to the sink, and normally you can see all the way down the street from it. But not tonight. It was pitch black. I bet you're thinking, of course it is, it's 4 in the morning, but I'm not talking nighttime dark. It was black. The only way to describe it was like the blackness was pressing up against the glass. I started to attempt to see out. I live on a well-lit street. There's a streetlight right across the street from my building, in a 3-story apartment complex that stretches to the right all the way down the block. All the sliding glass doors overlooking the street, and it also has a well-lit entrance. At the end of the block past the apartments is a controlled intersection with traffic lights and more street lights. Beyond the intersection are more apartments. So there's no shortage of light sources outside my window, but all I could see was black. I would guess that I was looking out for most of a minute when I saw a small yellow light down the street past the intersection. It was somebody's apartment window. At that moment, all of the remaining lights that should be out there became visible simultaneously, but it wasn't instantaneous. It was like everything was on one dimmer switch, and somebody turned it from off to max very quickly. I'm still fascinated by this unique glitch. And a second glitch. I have a silver counter. It's in the shape of a ball and it fits in the palm of my hand. You click it to advance the numbers, and businesses use them to count people in lines. I used it all the time and I kept it on my nightstand. One day I went to grab it and it wasn't there. Checking carefully, I cleared everything off of my nightstand, onto my bed, and then put it all back. I then looked down around my nightstand for a second, and then looked back up to see it right in the middle of everything. This kind of thing has happened to me before, and I don't always get the items back, so I was grateful to still have it. I start to use it, and I notice that the count was wrong. It now doesn't register some clicks, about 1 in 10. So reality broke my counter. And to add an exclusive As the Raven Dreams update to this story, I recently tried using it again and now it works fine. I guess the universe doesn't like being accused of breaking something. Hello. To give a bit of background, I bought my partner a bottle of a certain brand of gin, let's call it brand X, for Christmas last year as a treat. It's a locally produced gin, and it is not cheap. We finished it last winter and we kept the bottle because it's a pretty bottle. It sat in the bookcase, a knackered old shelving unit by the front door, until we moved. I remember picking up the bottle and shaking it, even though it was empty, hoping that there might actually still be gin in it, even though there was literally none. That spring, I bought some of those bottle stoppers with strings of LED lights in them, one of which would go into that bottle and the other would go into an old rum bottle. We moved houses that June. All the bottles in that shelving unit were packed into boxes, and when we got the keys to the new place, everything in those boxes was put into the cupboard by the sink. I remember taking the fancy bottle out and thinking, that was a good gin. I should buy some more. It went on to the shelf with the other spirits in the box. At several points during that summer, I remember looking for gin and finding the empty bottle in the cupboard. Usually there would be a cheap bottle of Tesco gin or something similar that would suffice, but it wasn't quite brand X. Just your average 14-pound bottle of London dry gin. Back to this evening, I decide to go raking in the cupboard because I fancy something spirit-based, and I see the brand X bottle. It looks like it has liquid in it. Haha, if only, I thought. But I picked it up, and it still had something in it. Only about 150 milliliters or so, but still something. I asked my partner if he put water in the bottle for a laugh, No, I haven't touched it, he responded. I open the bottle and smell it. It smells exactly like Brand X gin. Excited, I get some tonic water out of the fridge and pour myself some gin and tonic. I'm not lying, it is definitely Brand X gin. The peppercorns are unmistakable. Neither of us can explain how it got there. Neither of us bought bottles of it in the meantime, and although the distillery is in our city, we didn't covertly refill our bottle at the distillery. It would have been ridiculous for such a small quantity. It was a real treat drinking the rest of the gin, but how the hell did it get there? To add a weird coincidence, my partner went through the kitchen at 1 after midnight, according to my radio-controlled watch, and he asked me if it was 1 after midnight. I wonder why he's asking, but it turns out that the clock on our oven is now correct. It's been wrong ever since we moved in, and I've never read how to fix it. I went through half an hour later, and it's still correct. Do Electrolux ovens sync with Antorn time signal? I've never heard of any that do that, but it wouldn't surprise me. But why did it take 4 months, though? And why tonight? Hello. To give a bit of background, I bought my partner a bottle of a certain brand of gin, let's call it Brand X, for Christmas last year as a treat. It's a locally produced gin, and it is not cheap. We finished it last winter and we kept the bottle because it's a pretty bottle. It sat in the bookcase, a knackered old shelving unit by the front door, until we moved. I remember picking up the bottle and shaking it, even though it was empty, hoping that there might actually still be gin in it, even though there was literally none. That spring, I bought some of those bottle stoppers with strings of LED lights in them, one of which would go into that bottle and the other would go into an old rum bottle. We moved houses that June. All the bottles in that shelving unit were packed into boxes, and when we got the keys to the new place, everything in those boxes was put into the cupboard by the sink. I remember taking the fancy bottle out and thinking, that was a good gin. I should buy some more. It went on to the shelf with the other spirits in the box. At several points during that summer, I remember looking for gin and finding the empty bottle in the cupboard. Usually there would be a cheap bottle of Tesco gin or something similar that would suffice, but it wasn't quite Brand X. Just your average 14-pound bottle of London dry gin. Back to this evening, I decide to go raking in the cupboard because I fancy something spirit-based, and I see the Brand X bottle. It looks like it has liquid in it. Haha, if only, I thought. But I picked it up, and it still had something in it. Only about 150 milliliters or so, but still something. I asked my partner if he put water in the bottle for a laugh. No, I haven't touched it, he responded. I open the bottle and smell it. It smells exactly like Brand X gin. Excited, I get some tonic water out of the fridge and pour myself some gin and tonic. I'm not lying, it is definitely Brand X gin. The peppercorns are unmistakable. Neither of us can explain how it got there. Neither of us bought bottles of it in the meantime, and although the distillery is in our city, we didn't covertly refill our bottle at the distillery. It would have been ridiculous for such a small quantity. It was a real treat drinking the rest of the gin, but how the hell did it get there? To add a weird coincidence, my partner went through the kitchen at 1 after midnight, according to my radio-controlled watch, and he asked me if it was 1 after midnight. I wonder why he's asking, but it turns out that the clock on our oven is now correct. It's been wrong ever since we moved in, and I've never read how to fix it. I went through half an hour later, and it's still correct. Do Electrolux ovens sync with Antorn time signal? I've never heard of any that do that, but it wouldn't surprise me. But why did it take 4 months, though? And why tonight? Here's a little backstory so that the story makes more sense. When I was a young teenager, I listened to a metaphysical fantasy radio drama called The Fourth Tower of Inverness, written by Meatball Fulton. I highly recommend it, and you can find it on a website called ZBS Media. Intermixed in the story, Mr. Fulton would insert excerpts from the lectures of Baba Ram Dass, and in one of these clips, Ram Dass talked about the difference between a Satguru and an Upaguru. A Satguru is a formal teacher, often an enlightened master. An Upaguru can quite literally be any single isolated incident or an epiphany. Like an interaction with a person, an event you find significant, or even something you think is a mistake. Anything that gets you one or more steps further down your spiritual path. My young mind was fascinated by this idea, and I made this concept of the Upaguru a guiding principle in my life. I even named my short-lived comic strip after it. You can find them on Instagram by searching #UpaMyGuru. I have synchronicities, or Upagurus, all the time. This one was so specific to me that it seemed miraculous. In 2019, I was going through a financial catastrophe. I had lost my life savings to a bad investment 2 years before this, and lost my job at the same time. And I was at the point where I had sold everything I could find of value. I'd been barely scraping by for months. On this particular day, I didn't even have money to eat, and if rent wasn't paid the next day, eviction proceedings would have started. At that moment, I had no idea where the money would come from, so I decided to play a game on my phone to try to get my mind off of my problems. The game was one that I'd managed to wean myself off of a while ago. It's one of those play for free, but you have to spend money if you want to get the really cool stuff in the games. In the game, you collected dragons. There are 5 rarities: common, uncommon, rare, legendary, and divine. After the game loaded, an announcement appeared about a new event where you could win a super rare divine dragon. You had to buy tickets to redeem for chests that held random prize. I spent the 10 free starting tickets they gave me all at once, without even caring if I won anything. Then, an announcement appeared saying that I had won the rarest prize, the divine dragon. And I had also won some gems, putting my total gems to 67, which is the year of my birth. I thought to myself, awesome, a divine synchronicity. But it wasn't over. Whenever this game gives out a new dragon, it assigns it a random 4-letter name. The name of the divine dragon was Upa. I saw it as divine Upaguru with a synchronicity on top. Needless to say, the money to pay the rent miraculously came from an unlikely place. And from there, eventually things got better. This experience felt like the universe was telling me that everything was going to be fine. It's necessary to explain that my culture has restrained me, or any member of my family that witnessed this event, from ever telling anyone but our immediate family members about what happened. However, I now understand that we made a mistake. I can remember a majority of my childhood, from being put in a car seat to pulling out the pots and pans in the kitchen as a baby. I can remember my father holding me as he cooked hamburger meat, and the Happy Meal toys my older brothers received. So, when I was 3 years old, I drowned in my uncle's pool after chasing a ball. My grandfather asked my brothers and I if we knew how to swim. He asked, jokingly, when we first arrived at my uncle's house. But Being a child, I thought that I could, having seen it done on television. Anyway, I would carry my favorite toy around with me, and later that day, while I was playing in the hot tub, it slipped from my hand and fell to the bottom of the tub. My cousin, 2 older brothers, and I were standing on the seat of the tub when it fell, and the heat and bubbles prevented me from being able to put my head underwater. I asked my cousin to get it for me, but he ignored me. So I assumed that he was intentionally ignoring me in order to steal my action figure. Therefore, once we left the hot tub, I was determined not to leave his house empty-handed, and I decided to take his ball as recompense for my G.I. Joe. I ended up kicking it as I ran towards it, and it bounced away from me towards the pool. And chasing after it, I fell into the pool and drowned. I've been able to lucid dream and astral project ever since, but because I was so young, I thought that was normal. I have night terrors accordingly. But one night, when I was a little older in Long Beach by the border of Compton, where the Big Donut is, my grandparents, mother, and 2 older brothers were driving home, stopped at a stop sign, when I thought I saw the moon behind the trees. I suddenly noticed that the moon was actually behind a house. I was used to seeing this from my dreams, but at this point I was in a station wagon. I looked harder at what I thought was the moon, and I saw that it was really just a ball of light, until it stopped glowing. It dimmed and became a ship, silently hovering and slowly spinning in place. It was a real ship. The bottom looked like a computer motherboard with lights running towards the center of it. I told my mom, and after a moment I got them to look because they didn't believe me at first. They got really scared, and my grandmother drove away as fast as she could. But it followed us, and they got even more terrified. Someone else had to have seen it too, because we were speeding down the neighborhood as fast as we could, but we could not lose it. The car was really loud as we ran, but a voice said, "No, look at it." And I saw that it was technology. Real technology, and a real ship. And as it pursued us, my mom got scared and made us close our eyes and pray. When we opened my eyes, because my family refused to look at it, they asked me if it was still there, and it wasn't. Believe me or not, I don't care. This is what happened to us. And we've experienced other situations that could be considered hauntings, like electronic toys and equipment working on their own without any sort of power supply. Okay, so I've had some minor glitches before, and you can read about them from my profile if you're curious. It's always little stuff like seeing the cat outside whenever I remember letting him in. Don't worry, he's an indoor cat. He just sits in the sun when I'm outside too. Or people in my life not being where they should be. This is one of those times. Some background. I live with my husband, our 2 sons, my best friend since freshman year of high school, 2001, I feel so old, and her 2 sons. We collectively parent the kids, and we consider ourselves to be one integrated family. DH is a casino dealer, and BFF is a wedding photographer, and I'm the stay-at-home mom and homeschool teacher. This incident was a few hours ago or so DH had already left for work, and BFF had a short wedding today, so she's been gone since this early afternoon. I was in the kitchen making dinner, and I heard her knock. Each adult has their own knock pattern because the kids wanted us to. And then I heard BFF's voice call, "Hello?" Her tone was partially in greeting and partially questioning. We have baby locks everywhere, so I recognized that tone as meaning both, "I'm home," and also, "I'm stuck in the laundry room, can you let me out?" I called back, "Hey, how'd it go?" But she didn't answer me. Usually the boys run to the door when a parent comes home, so I figured that she had her hands full and they would give her a hand. But the boys didn't get up. 3 of them were on devices in the living room, and the last one was in the kitchen with me. I sent him to go see if she needed some help, and he came back and said that he couldn't find her. After a few minutes, and another search, I realized I can just check the garage for her car, and it's gone. I call her, and she told me that she hasn't been home since she left this afternoon. It starts to dawn on me, embarrassingly slowly, that none of the dogs started barking at the sound of her voice. And then I remember how weird it was when the boys all ignored her, and also how the one in the kitchen looked confused when I asked him to go help. So I asked them if they heard her come home, and they all said no. The one who'd been standing next to me in the kitchen said that I just started talking to nobody. Side note, I am tickled by the fact that not one child ever asked why we were looking for BFF. I start talking to thin air, and I ask them all to search the house for a parent they know is gone all day and isn't home yet. They were all just like, okay. And they started looking under beds and stuff. Not one thought to question it, and they thought that she might be under the bed. I love how delightfully weird my kids are. But, for serious, I swear on my life that it was her voice. We were duet partners, and since then, I've spent 22 years listening to her voice. I was professionally trained for 4 years to specifically listen for her voice. I've heard that voice tell me secrets, and sad things, and happy things. Some things that I never thought anyone in the world would ever say. And she talks a lot. If there is a single voice in the universe that I am deeply attuned to, and could always reliably identify, regardless of context, it's hers. And I can't explain it. Hello, Raven. My husband and I are longtime listeners, and you're usually the last thing we listen to as we fall asleep. Well, thank you. Well, this story is a little bit different than the usual glitches. Ever since my husband and I got together 11 years ago, we've had your everyday glitches happen more times than we can count. We're talking keys, wallet, phone, pen, insert item name here going missing, and then turning up where we know for a fact it never could have been. Or we'd already checked multiple times to know it was never there. Sometimes it would happen once a month, sometimes once a week. And at one point, after my mom passed away almost 3 years ago, it was happening multiple times a day. Recently, whatever entity has been having fun with this has decided to finally start messing with my sister. All 3 of us live together. She's never had anything like this happen before. She's 38. And these things didn't happen to neither my husband nor myself until we started hanging out. But that's just a little backstory for this one. Every time we had a misplaced item, it was just that, an item. But this day was going to be different. Around April, May of 2022, my husband and I had a pretty big argument. I can't even remember what it was about, but I know it was something trivial. We were all still dealing with my mom's sudden passing the year before, and had other family drama going on, just adding to our stress. So we just had a moment where we blew up at each other, and we each went to our corners, so to speak. I won't say to cool off. This was one of those stupid arguments where neither of us wanted to admit we were wrong and apologize. So we just stormed off. After a few hours, my sister comes to ask me if I knew where my husband was, since he was supposed to give her a ride to the store, but she couldn't find him. The car was here, and she also couldn't reach him on his phone. I pull the phone out and do the Find My for his phone. He has a bad habit of forgetting where he puts his phone or the car keys, so we keep location services on and have an AirTag attached to the car keys. I find his phone with his wallet and keys in the garage, so we know that he didn't go anywhere. We don't have a big house, just 2 floors, so there's not too many places he could be. After searching the house and yards, we still don't find him. I'm just about to start calling people that he may have tried to walk to or called for a ride when we hear someone calling out from the laundry room. Something to know about this room: the door is a bit warped, so it sticks really bad. There's no way to open or close it completely without everyone in the house hearing it. My sister and I had already checked this small room that only has the washer, dryer, and desk for sewing crafts and a chair. We turned out the light, closed the door completely, and moved on. When we heard the voice coming from the laundry room, the door was still closed tight. We hadn't even left the downstairs, and the light was still off. We opened the door and turned on the light to find my husband sitting in the room, looking like he just woke up from an awkward nap. He had no idea how he'd gotten in there, and he was not there when we had checked. The last thing he remembered was putting his phone, wallet, and keys on the workbench in the garage, and then waking up in the dark not knowing where he was, and he started to call out. So, like I said, items disappearing and reappearing are commonplace for us. But my husband disappearing and reappearing? I only hope that it does not happen again. Earlier this year, my husband went through a terrifying, life-threatening thing. And not to go into any details, but at the point of this story, he was still bedbound, and we were staying at my parents' house. Some relevant background: my parents' house is big. 2 floors plus a rooftop apartment plus a basement. It's also pretty old though, and needs something fixed every month or so. My dad is very old school, and he deals with people he likes even if they overcharge him. He's been using the same plumber for years, same electrician, same gardener, etc. This happened back in my home country of Jordan. The country is mostly Muslim, but my family is Christian. So, we wake up that day and the whole kitchen is flooded. My dad had recently gotten a new water filter installed, and it was giving them trouble since the beginning. My dad had to leave, but he called his water filter guy, which is hella specific, to come fix whatever is going on. Water filter guy said he'll be there in a couple of hours. About an hour later, the doorbell rings, and my brother opens the door. It's a man in a suit with a little briefcase. My bro thought it was one of the doctors for my husband, so he immediately invited him in. The man immediately corrects him and says that he is not a doctor, that he's there for the water filter. My mom knows the water filter guy, and this isn't him, but she just assumes that the original guy just sent this guy ahead. So, my mom asks what he needs. I'm in and out this whole situation as I take care of my husband. So the man goes to the roof and looks at the water tanks, and he takes pictures. He came back down and sat in the kitchen with my mom, telling her what he thinks the issue is. The tanks need replacing, and how much they'll cost and all of that. So, my mom calls my dad and passes the phone to the man, who gives my dad the rundown, and then my dad says he'll talk to his original guy about the price. The man starts arguing with my dad on the phone to the point that my dad basically yells at him and hangs up. At this point, my mom kind of apologetically asks him to leave, and that my dad will just talk to his boss because that's what he prefers. The man says, "What boss?" She tells him his name, and the man says he's never heard of that guy before in his life. Now my mom is freaking out. She asks who sent him, and he says nobody. So she asks him how much she owes him so she can quickly get him out of the house. He says that he noticed the man in the hospital bed and that his only payment is that he's going to ask God to heal him. Then he left, and that was it. My dad's actual guy showed up a little later and fixed the filter, but my mom and I were shook by the whole thing. We talked about it in detail for hours. We talked to my dad, and my dad's guy, and the nurse that was there that day, and my brother who opened the door, and none of us could figure out how this happened, or who he was. This man just showed up to check water filters on the same day the water filter burst, but didn't want any compensation. Nobody sent him. Like, how? It still bugs me. My mom thinks he's an Ifrit or demon, but I just don't know. I was going through a lot at the time, so my mind might not have been all there, but everyone else that experienced this, just help. Any ideas? The OP did edits to add. My husband's doing much better, thankfully. He's about 90% recovered and is still healing. Thank you for your kind words, everyone. I hope he has a speedy rest of his recovery, and I hope he's doing well. I just found out about this page via a YouTube video that reminded me of this weird event that happened to me a couple of years ago. I was driving on the highway, going down the main hill in my city. It's super snowy, nighttime. There's a train bridge that's above the highway that I'm approaching. Also, I'm in the left lane of 2 lanes. All of a sudden, I hit ice and start swerving and then spinning down the hill. I do 3 180-degree rotations diagonally into the right lane. After the first 180, I clock a white car in the right lane and remember thinking, man, I hope they don't hit me. I hope they get into the other lane. By the way, time really does slow down in accidents like this. I had enough time to think of a plan and diagram the situation out in my head and protect myself. Everything. Because I noticed that I was going to hit the guardrail next to the cement holding up the train bridge. After another 360 spin, the car in the right lane is still in the right lane and is ever closer. And I don't have enough room to spin again. There's about a foot left before I crash. I remember thinking, is this guardrail gonna smash my window? And so I decided to just huddle into a ball and brace for impact. I also pulled my hood more over to the side of my face, in case the glass shattered at my face. And I squeezed my eyes closed. 10 seconds go by, 20 more. I'm not sure how long, but I peeked one eye open because nothing was happening. I should have opened my eyes to a car headlight coming at me. But instead, my car is in P for park. I'm in my own lane, the left lane, and my car is facing forwards, in park. The car supposed to hit me had passed me. It was a huge WTF moment for me. I kind of assumed it was guardian spirits or angels these past couple of years, but I do love simulation theory as well, as I'm not religious. But it just never crossed my mind that this was a glitch, until I watched that YouTube video. Listening to glitch stories about inexplicable disappearing items reminds me of this story that happened several years ago. It was March 24th, 2017, and I was off to a good start on a date with this guy who would soon become my boyfriend. The weather was unseasonably warm for southern Pennsylvania. There was casual flirting, small gestures, and lots of hand-holding. We drove separately. This will be important later. We decided to browse the GameStop at our local shopping center, and agreed to meet outside the store. I remember putting my keys in my purse. We were in there for about 15 minutes, and as we came out and walked to our cars, still engaged in conversation, I reached into my purse for my keys. Nothing. I stopped and looked closely inside, checking all of the compartments. There was no way that they were in there. We walked back into the store and inquired about a missing set of car keys. They hadn't seen them either. Now that we checked the rational places, we checked the irrational places, such as around the immediate and adjoining parking lots. This wouldn't have made sense because it was not a windy night. To our horror, but no surprise, they still didn't turn up. At that point, I did the only thing that I could, which was ask him to drive me home to pick up a duplicate key. And this still wouldn't have brought back the flash drive attached to the lanyard on the original set that had months of work saved on a project I was working on. At this point, we were dumbfounded. After picking up the duplicate key, he took me back to my car so that we could resume our date. And the following day, I called the GameStop again, swearing up and down that that was the last place I had seen my keys. They confirmed that there were no lanyards with car keys left from over the night before. I drove up to search the parking lot again, and still nothing. It's like those keys vanished into thin air. I visited Walmart and had a copy made for my new duplicate key. Also, I was able to retrace most of the work from my project on my laptop. But still, to this day, I have no clue what happened. Was God trying to teach me a lesson in being resourceful in an unwelcome situation? Or was it a glitch? Any ideas? Hi Raven. I'm a new subscriber and I've been binge watching your videos lately. Glitch stories are some of my favorites, so I figured I would share my own story. I moved from Texas to Tennessee in 2020. After moving into our new home and getting settled, we began to notice odd happenings. We moved into a home that was built in 1986, so it was a little bit older, but had no major issues. After moving in, we noticed a lot of odd things happening that seemed a little paranormal. Footsteps, hearing a child laughing at night, and things disappearing. The one situation that really boggled my mind was in 2021. I know it sounds silly, but I think my keys were taken to another timeline for a little while. I was getting ready to go to the store and I went to grab my car keys from the kitchen counter where I always left them. Except they weren't there. That's weird, I thought. And so I checked my bedroom, my purse, the couch cushions, under the couch, the bathroom, the mudroom door that I always used to get into the house, everywhere. At this point, I was panicking because I had them when I got home from work. I had to have them because I was able to get into the house. I had my whole family searching. We looked high and low. I had work the next day, so I was about to have a full-blown panic attack. After looking through and through for an hour, we gave up. Frustrated, I said out loud, "Can whoever or whatever took my keys please return them? I have an errand to run and work tomorrow, and I need my keys. Please?" I took a little time to calm my nerves and eventually decided to go into the laundry room to do some wash. As I was emptying the basket into the washing machine, there were my keys, at the very bottom of the laundry basket, buried under a bunch of dirty clothes. It's not a scary glitch when compared to other people's stories, but it definitely threw me for a loop and made me question reality for a while. How did I let myself into the house, put my keys on the kitchen counter, and then they ended up buried under days' worth of dirty clothes in the laundry room? I feel like something took them into another timeline or dimension for a little while. But at least they returned them after I asked. Gotta give them props for that. I'm not totally sure if this belongs here, but I'm not sure where else it fits. 30 plus years ago, when I was still way too young to have it, my mom bought me an amethyst while traveling in Thailand. And a few years ago, she had it set in a necklace and gave it to me for a birthday gift. I wear this necklace every single day, and it has a lot of sentimental value to me. I'm currently fostering a puppy, so my house has been puppy-proofed, including rolling up our area rug so that the floor is easier to clean if he has accidents. This becomes relevant in a minute. So, the other day, I took the foster puppy to the groomer, and he was scared. I was halfway holding him while the groomer did her magic, and the puppy started nibbling on my necklace. I tucked the necklace under my shirt and didn't think anything of it. We got done at the groomer, loaded the puppy into his crate, and went to pick my kids up from school. This was like an hour's worth of driving and a few trips in and out of the car. I got to my kids' school and was adjusting my necklace, and I noticed that the amethyst was gone. I was crushed, because this necklace is so special to me. We looked all over the floor of the school, the pathway out to the parking lot, etc., and nothing. I scoured the inside of the car, the inside of the dog crate, called the groomer to look, and even, super gross, I know, examined the puppy's droppings to see if he somehow swallowed it in the short time he was nibbling on my necklace. But nothing. It was in my necklace when I left for the groomer and was gone by the time I got home. I basically just gave up on ever finding it. Last night, my niece and nephew came to stay with us, so I was cleaning up the house for their visit. I was steam cleaning the floor and unrolled and vacuumed the area rugs too. The kids came over and had been playing throughout the house, and all three of the dogs have been out and about in the house. It's been sheer chaos, honestly. This morning I randomly noticed something sparkle on the rug, and there was my amethyst. This rug was rolled up until yesterday and has been vacuumed twice. Kids and dogs have been back and forth all over it since last night. I have literally zero idea of how it could have ended up there. I don't know if this is a glitch in the Matrix, but it is super freaking weird. This is a story that happened to me in 2011. At the beginning of 2011, I broke up with my boyfriend of 6 years in a very messy and painful end to our relationship. I was in a lot of pain for at least 6 months. Towards the end of the year, I started feeling better, more like the self that I used to be before that long relationship. During Christmas 2011, I visited my mom in Mexico. I live in Canada, and I try to visit my mom at least once a year. Mexico City is a mystical place, and reality alters when I visit. One day I woke up from the most wonderful dream that I'd had in years. I should say beforehand that I am a serious lucid dreamer. In my dreams, I fly, I shapeshift, and I explore the many dimensions of the dream time. I studied shamanic dreaming for some years, and I spend serious time in the dream time. Sometimes I spend weeks or even months in the dream time, only to wake up the next day in waking reality. This is very confusing, and I need several hours to remember who I am in this waking world. Well, this holiday season in 2011, at my mom's place in Mexico, I spent 3 months in the dream time with a wonderful person that I was completely in love with. He was half Dutch, he worked with computers, and he had a reddish beard, even though his hair was brown. I felt so safe and secure and loved that I was sad when I woke up. I missed the person from my dreams, and the feelings that I was experiencing. I told the dream to my mother, remarking how strange it was that this person worked with computers since all of my previous relationships have been with artist types. Fast forward to the new year, in 2012, and I met a very nice guy on a dating website. He was sweet, he was funny, and we hit it off from the beginning. We started dating the same week. Slowly, the pain from my last breakup dissolved, and I was left with a very warm feeling of safety and security. Around Valentine's Day 2012, this guy grew a beard, and then I recognized him. He was the guy from my dream. He is half Dutch. He does work with computers, and his beard is reddish. Most of all, I recognized the feelings that I had felt in that dream. A love that was warm and safe. And now, we've been married for 10 years. Hey Raven, I've been a long-time listener of your podcast, and I love your channel. And I'm ready to submit my first Glitch in the Matrix story. My story happened in 2007, in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. Mind you, I have a big family, but at the time, I was staying at my older sister's house. And I have twin nephews, and an older nephew and a niece that also live at the house with us. So there's the backstory. Also, my twin nephews play a big role because, at the time, they were very straight edge. They were in middle school. So, I mean, they didn't really get into mischief or skip school at the time. Starting my story. It was a really nice, sunny day, and I wanted to skip school for lunch. My sister only stayed 3 blocks away from the school, so it was an easy walk to her house. So, I went to my sister's house and no one was there. It was about 11:30 a.m., so lunchtime. I was in high school at the time. I'm sitting in my niece's room on her bed, looking at the front door, which is about 20 feet away. I'm chilling on her bed, just hanging out and thinking what I'm going to do for lunch. The door opens, and it's one of my twin nephews, Anton. I just look at him, and he just looked at me, walks through, and then he goes upstairs, which is catty-corner from the bedroom that I'm sitting in. Anton and T are the twins. Literally 1 minute later, my older nephew, K-Swiss, walks in, and he's like, "Screw that, I'm not going back to school. They can kiss my butt." I'm just like, "Kyle, shush. Be quiet. Anton's upstairs." Kyle says, "No, he's not. I would have seen him walking ahead of me. He's not here." Kyle runs up the stairs, looks in his bedroom, looks in the twins' bedroom, and shouted, "Where are you at? Stop playing." He then comes back downstairs and says, "Hey, Sam, Anton's not here." Shivers literally go up my body. I'm freaking out. I literally saw my nephew walk in the door and go upstairs. It just chills me because we didn't speak to each other, we just looked at each other. The house has always had a weird vibe, but to this day, I get goosebumps thinking about this. Anton was never in the house when I physically saw him. Not even 1 minute before K-Swiss, my older nephew, came in the door. I looked up my experience, and it pointed me to possibly having seen a doppelganger. Thanks for reading my story, and happy holidays. I'm genuinely freaked out over this, and I'm trying to find an explanation. So, I'm generally a bad ring wearer. I don't like how they feel despite fitting perfectly. I take my wedding band and engagement ring off during the night without realizing, and I go searching the sheets on a weekly basis. I'm also pretty forgetful, and will take my rings off and forget to put them back on for days at a time. I'm struggling over here. A few weeks ago, I was making pizza dough and I took my rings off, as I do, so they don't get dirty and sticky. Back to being forgetful, I completely forgot for multiple days, until I went to put my rings back on and realized they weren't on my nightstand. Remembering I had made pizza and had taken them off, I check all my normal kitchen spots where I might put my rings, though usually it's somewhere obvious like the cutting board, counter, etc. Somewhere I would see every day. And I couldn't find anything. I searched for days. Despite being a terrible ring wearer, I do love my husband dearly, and was absolutely distraught at losing them. They aren't expensive or monetarily irreplaceable, but I just was absolutely heartbroken over losing them, because they mean so much to me, and from a sentimental standpoint, they are absolutely irreplaceable. After spending a whole day searching, I gave up looking, but I figured eventually they would turn up, at least hopefully. I doubt anyone would have thrown them out by accident, mostly because no one cleans up my kitchen. But as forgetful as I am usually pretty observant and am careful when I clean, so as to not just throw anything away in my path. But I digress. My husband comes home from work that evening and immediately goes, "Awesome, you found the rings. Where were they?" To which I tell them that I didn't find them. Cue his laugh, because they were on my finger. I'm still beside myself thinking about it. I searched for days. My husband helped me search. There's absolutely no way I was wearing these rings. The only possible explanation I can concoct is that I came about them outside of my searching, like when playing with my daughter, brushing my teeth, or doing some other task, and instinctively put them back on without realizing it. As mentioned, I often put things in obvious places, so maybe it just didn't jump out in my brain as lost item found when I came across them, because they were in a usual place, but I don't know. It's the strangest thing to have ever happened to me. Hi. So, basically, I, 18 male, was babysitting for my cousin's 1-year-old daughter 2 days ago, since I had free time on my hands, and also because their house has a snooker pool, and I wanted to help them out because the parents had to go out of town for some event. So I called my only 2 friends to accompany me while they were gone for 2 days. The first day was fun. We ordered takeout, played on our PlayStation, played some snooker, all whilst the baby was peacefully having the time of her life, chewing on her toys and sleeping. It was 8 o'clock when I asked my friend to go get some milk, since we ran out, and I had to feed her before she slept. I changed her pads and I went to the kitchen to wash her bottle feeder because of the residual milk from a few hours ago. My friend returned with the milk, and as I took it to the kitchen, my jaw dropped. There was perfectly warm milk inside the bottle with its cover closed. I yelled for my friend thinking he was playing a prank on me, but he assured me that he wasn't. And I believed him because, well, he was outside. And I threw away the remainder of the milk whilst he was outside. And I kept the empty bottle on the counter, closed. And also, the pan that I used to warm the milk was clean from the last time I washed it. I was also sure that the last batch of milk from the container was given to her a few hours ago, because I threw away the milk carton. I checked for the empty carton in the bin, and to my surprise, it was there, empty. I had no idea what to do. I started shivering and my friend asked me to drop the act, since he thought I was playing a prank on him. But God knows that I wasn't. I wish. I poured the milk in a glass because no way in hell was I about to give the girl this milk. I pasteurized the new batch, and I gave it to her. Now I was extremely curious. and I was having trouble sleeping, so I got up and went to the kitchen, and I drank the milk from the glass to see if it was real. It tasted fine, except for the fact that there was no Enfamil infant formula in it, which made it even weirder because I wasn't allowed to give her just the milk. I shrugged the event off until today, when I got the worst, let's just say, stomach issue ever. I don't know what would have happened if I gave her the milk which magically appeared. I don't know what to think of it, but this is one of the most terrifying moments of my life. Me and my friend have kept it as a secret because I'm pretty sure no one would believe us. It's a feeling that I can never explain to somebody. Any theories as to what happened? I'm not sure if I'm imagining things, or if I'm going crazy, but I believe that I just saw my future. I mean, I always wondered if people have their future selves walking around in the present, and I sometimes wonder if my future self is around too. But I think I should tell you the story now. I was just on my way home from work. I'm currently doing an apprenticeship as a metal worker, and due to some unlucky circumstances, I missed my tram and had to take the later one. When I took the next tram, I took a seat near the door, noticing a man on the opposite side of the door. I didn't pay him much attention at first, but then I noticed something. On his workwear, I could read the first initial of his first name and his full last name. That was when I realized that he had the same last name as me, while his first name also started with the same initial as my first name. After realizing that, I took a more exact look at him, and he did look quite similar to me. He had the same hair color, the same eye color, had a similar, if not the same, hairstyle that I normally have. My hair is currently longer, but normally I have it rather short. And even his face did look kind of similar to mine. The only real difference was that he was a bit thinner than I currently am. Of course, he was a bit older, but still, the physical similarities were there. And since I already mentioned his workwear, he was wearing blue overalls, looking similar to the ones that I was wearing. Although, I was wearing black overalls. But it was the same workwear that you would expect a metalworker to wear to work. It didn't stop there, though. He was apparently working for a craftsman company that also seems to have focused on electrical engineering. This also caused me to believe that this man could be my future self, simply because I was planning on investing 2 more years at my local Academy of Technology in order to become a state-certified technician. And while I'm currently working on becoming a metal worker, I'm also open to becoming an electrical engineer, especially if my salary is a higher one then. The man apparently even lives in a part of my town where I always wanted to live, due to the close proximity to our local botanical garden. So, yeah. I'm not sure if my mind is playing tricks on me or if I'm just going crazy, or if I actually saw my future self there. But I definitely wanted to share this story. I work with my mom, and we own a little cafe. We have this ongoing joke whenever things get misplaced, that the previous owner has been in and taken them in the night. We don't really believe that. As long as we had the place, everyone that works there has always commented, "Oh, I thought I heard someone walk in," but then there isn't anyone there. And sometimes all of us will look up to the front of the shop at the same time, thinking that someone was there when there isn't. This happens at least once a day, but usually multiple times a day. Back to the misplaced item. This is happening a lot at the moment, as in specific knives that are only used for certain tasks, just going missing and then turning up days later on the side. Now, I know things can hide in plain sight, and sometimes you can't see for looking, but this is becoming really frequent now. It's not as though we've put them back in the wrong place and then find them. We find them in plain sight, after days of items being missing, and then it reappears in an area that has been heavily used by one of us and been thoroughly cleaned down at the end of the day. So if it was ever there, it would have been put away. It's so odd, but the frequency of this happening is becoming a little frustrating now. One of the ladies that works with us made a comment today that there must be a gremlin working behind her, moving everything. This lady has worked with me for over 2 years, and she's commenting also. I haven't mentioned anything at all to her, and she works opposite shifts to my mom, so they have not spoken about it. Also, a full panini machine went missing. We got a new one and stored the old one away just in case anything happened to the new one. We had a backup. I'm the only person with keys apart from my mom. But Mom wasn't even in the country at the time. It reappeared about 3 or 4 months later in exactly the same spot it had been stored in, but yet no one was able to find it for months. My mom thought I had thrown it away and was lying to her. I'm not sure if this is relevant, but since the shop was opened 19 years ago, it has had 3 previous owners, me and my mom being the 4th. 2 of the 3 previous owners have died whilst owning the cafe, and the lady that we bought it off of sold it because she is terminal with cancer. Anyway, any thoughts or ideas on this would be great. Especially ideas to make it stop would be appreciated. My husband, then boyfriend, Y, and I, F, were looking around for a place to live together sometime last December. This takes place in Japan. We needed a place between our jobs, which were on the opposite side of the prefecture that we lived in, unfortunately. The first place we looked at rejected us from buying because I was a foreigner, even though my boyfriend was Japanese. He was pretty livid, and I told him that it was normal, though not fair. We kept looking until we came upon an ad for a house to rent. Old, but somehow right. It really felt right to me. I loved it when I first saw the pictures. The area was really great too, and the price, and they were pet-friendly, which is rare in Japan. How could it get any better? We were worried that we would be rejected again, but we were accepted happily. We signed on the day, and Y and I were so happy. It seemed perfect. After that first rejection, we had some thought that there could be some bad news, but everything worked out. We still lived in the house, and it's full of character, but something really strange happened that same day. We were on Cloud 9, walking around the area, going to the supermarket. When we entered, we started heading towards the escalator, and I heard a familiar noise. I'd worked at Starbucks and other cafes for several years in America, so I knew what I heard. The grinding of coffee beans. Then, I looked down to the floor below, and I saw the Starbucks sign. There were customers waiting too. I told Y, and he looked and saw it himself. He even texted a friend about the Starbucks. That was the icing on the cake, to have my go-to cafe on the way to work. But I think you know the rest of the story. We came back to that supermarket, went looking for that Starbucks again after a hard day of moving in, but we only found a lemonade stand in its place. The sign was not the same. My husband isn't a believer of the supernatural, but even he was a bit boggled. He remembered it, and the message that he sent to his friend. We were so spooked. We laughed it off. Maybe we had a glitch because we were so happy, but I'll never know. In addendum to the post, the shopping center is called Toko Toko, and the lemonade stand that was in place of the Starbucks is a brand called Lemonica. It would be very difficult to tear down and replace the whole thing with another brand in just a week. Hello, Raven. Long-time listener, first-time submitter. I have a story that I believe belongs here. When I was 18 years old and dating my first real boyfriend, he lived in the city while I was in the suburbs. He was staying on a friend's mom's couch while they were saving to get their own place, and some friends and I were coming to pick him up so that we could all attend a local street festival. This was going to be my first time meeting his friends, but my friend who drove us already knew pretty much everyone, so I was going to be the only new face at this gathering. When we arrived, he introduced me to all of his friends, and I sat down on the couch next to one of maybe a dozen or so people at the house at the time. The guy I sat next to was the oldest brother of the three guys with whom my then boyfriend was crashing with. The youngest two brothers, Stephen and Peter, only mildly resembled one another, but this guy definitely looked like Stephen, the brother that my then boyfriend ended up moving in with. He had a similar face, but with a stronger jawline. He told me that his name was Eric, and we even shook hands. After a few minutes of conversation, those of us going to the festival took off, and I said goodbye to Eric and told him that it was nice to meet him. Skip to several months later, and my boyfriend and Stephen had finally moved into their own place. Stephen and I are on the couch one day, and he mentions something about his brother. I inquire which one, and a puzzled look comes across his face. He explains that he only has one brother, Peter. It turns out, every single person in that house that day can be accounted for, except the guy that I not only spoke with, but physically touched and shook hands with. I was shocked and confused, and told Stephen about my encounter, and he said that he believed me because he could tell I was being genuine when I asked. We went over every person that was there that day when my boyfriend got home, and every single person was accounted for, except for Eric. No one recalls me talking to anyone on the couch, either. Stephen was so bewildered that he even asked his mom if she had miscarried, and she assured him that she did not. I'm not sure who or what Eric was, but the only thing I can come up with is that this was either a glitch, or a parallel universe opened up or something. Or he was a ghost. I'm really not sure, but I remember him so vividly. Does anyone out there have any idea what this could have been? And thank you, Raven. This was my creepy glitch moment. So, this happened about 2 or 3 months ago. I've been working at this hotel for 7 months now, and I'm very familiar with the routine. One day I'm cleaning my rooms and I'm doing pretty well on time, and I'm in my 4th room at this point. I'm about to finish this room and it's almost break time, which means that it's almost noon. I go out to my cart to push it into that room so that it's not in the hall while I break, which is a safety precaution. I pick up my clipboard so I can bring it to my boss like we do every break, so that she can put the clean rooms into the system, and, oddly enough, I haven't marked any rooms off. Although I definitely remember doing them and marking them off as I went. I'm so confused at this point and think to myself, maybe I just forgot to mark them off after all. So, I go back to double check the rooms as we're trained to do if we forget to mark them down, just to ensure that we don't have any uncleaned rooms left by mistake. I was in complete shock when I walked back into each one of these rooms, and none of them had been cleaned. The beds weren't made, the trash cans were still filled, etc. But they were stripped of the dirty linen, so I had definitely been in there. Just, what? Even more odd, all the doors were closed. But once we stripped the rooms of the old linen, we flipped the door stoppers to leave the door cracked for when we can come back to clean them. When we clean the rooms, we start at one end of the hall and work our way down. So, even if I had a lapse in memory, why would I start in the middle of the hallway? Not to mention, what would I have even been doing for the last 3.5 hours of work? I wasn't assigned to do anything but rooms that day, so I couldn't have been doing something else. I go down on break still confused. I give my boss my clipboard and she asked me if I was okay and why I didn't have any rooms marked off. I told her that I had thought I marked them off, just played it off as a mistake, and told her I would correct it after break. Then I go find my work friend, let's call her Jessica, and I asked if she remembered seeing me making the bed in one of those 3 rooms, 304 to be exact, when she was walking down the hallway. She agreed that she did, and even pointed out that she stood at my cart and talked to me for a good 2 to 3 minutes while I was doing so. After break, I took her back upstairs and showed her those rooms, and she was in just as much shock as I was that nothing had been done in those rooms. Even indicated that I was in there to clean them. A lot of weird things have happened throughout my life, but this was one of the weirdest things to happen to me yet. Was this a glitch? What do you think? I've told the story in a comment section of the subreddit, or the high strangeness one, but I didn't go into detail. This happened to my mother, but it involved me as well. It was winter somewhere between 2019 and 2021. I thought that it was last year, but after talking to my mom recently about this, it was definitely more time ago than it seemed. So, this is what happened. It was around 6 to 7 a.m., and I was coming back from a nightclub with 2 of my friends. And after crossing the river by boat, we went inside the surface subway that was still not running. However, my mother, who has always been very protective, wanted to pick me up from the subway, with her car without telling me that she would. Now, this is what happened according to her. As she was arriving to the subway station, she saw me inside the metro with my friends, so she knew exactly where I was, and who the friend was that was standing on the seat next to me. As she saw me, she quickly went around the station with the car, and parked it to call me to say that she was outside. This took maybe 30 seconds at most. What happened next was truly bizarre. When I answered the phone, which took maybe an additional 10 seconds, I was already some 8 or 9 metro stations ahead of the station that she was in. The same station that I was just in her reality. To get there from where I was initially, it would take easily 15 to 20 minutes, by metro of course. I remember telling her on the phone where I was, and she became truly shocked and confused. I was still a little drunk, so I didn't give too much importance to it in that moment, but the next day after talking to her about the event, I knew that what happened was something very strange. I know that she wasn't lying, because she knew exactly where I was sitting and who I was sitting next to. We still have no idea how this happened. I've heard similar stories here on Reddit, and there must be something really complex in this existence that we are not aware of, or just can't comprehend. Last weekend, my family and I stayed in a house at the coast to celebrate my mother's 70th birthday. We arrived Friday evening and decided to go out to breakfast Saturday morning. The restaurant we chose was a Grateful Dead-themed restaurant called Grateful Bread. My husband and I have been there a few times and love their delicious menu. Since we were a party of 7, we were split up between 2 tables. I sat at a table with my husband and father, while my son, mother, sister, and her boyfriend sat at another. My husband and I sat facing the bakery counter and whiteboard with the daily specials written on it. Written on the board was the quiche of the day, which was a spinach, ham, broccoli, and cheddar quiche. It sounded great, so I ordered it. When the quiche arrived, the top was completely covered in layers of cheddar. It was delicious. Nice chunks of ham and large steamy broccoli bits. As I was eating, my husband said casually, "Hey, looks like you got the last piece of the quiche." I looked up and see the waitress erasing the quiche from the whiteboard. She then wrote in another quiche, which was a mushroom, onion, and zucchini option. I told my husband that I was happy that we came early enough because I would not have ordered that. I don't like mushrooms or zucchinis. I go back to eating, and as I load up my fork, I realize there's no longer cheese on the top of my slice of quiche, and it's filled with mushrooms and zucchini. Wait, what just happened? I asked my husband, showing him my food. He was dumbfounded. My husband is the type of guy you see in horror movies that is always trying to convince his wife that the obviously haunted house is just old and creaky. He's very practical, and even he claimed that this must have been a glitch. When I showed my dad, he just made a joke about triply Grateful Dead. When we left the restaurant and I told the rest of my family, they tried to explain it away. My sister said the quiche must have been half and half. The only problem with that logic is the way the food was split up. Mushrooms in the back, broccoli in the front of the slice. And what happened to the cheese? Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it was extremely strange. What do you think? About 6 years ago, I was working as an actor and I was out late doing a show, and up early the next day to do another one. The windscreen wipers on my piece of crap car were out of sync and would jam together and get stuck so they wouldn't wipe the windscreen. Just jiggle together in the middle. On the way back from my show, the rain on the motorway was absolutely torrential, and I literally couldn't see a damn thing with my wipers connected in the middle, tugging on each other. So I pulled over. Sick to death of this bloody car, I put my foot on the bonnet and pulled the left wiper out from its base, unconnected it from the right one and tossed it into the bushes, so I had the driver's part of the window screen still being wiped, even though there was absolutely nothing on the left side. I got back about 2 a.m. I lived in a block of flats in London with no parking, so I'd parked about 10 minutes walk down the road. When I got to my car at 8 a.m., I noticed straight away that the left wiper had been replaced. Not with another standard windscreen wiper that is made of 2 blades connected in the middle, but with a very differently shaped single back window wiper. I stared for about 5 minutes and got in my car and had to go. The small blade on the left was wiping half of the passenger window, enough for me to see out of, and the left and right wipers weren't connecting anymore because the left was too short. I still had my back wipers, so it's not like it had been taken from the back and put on the front, but the new one was identical to my back one. No elbow connection where the blade would go, so it definitely was not a front wiper. I also had that confirmed next time I took my car into a garage. I also know for a fact that I ripped it out at the base the night before, because I put my foot on the bonnet and tugged until it popped out of the base. And driving home, there was nothing at all on the left screen. I immediately texted the guy that I was seeing to ask if he was my wiper fairy, and he not only lived an hour away, but knew nothing about it. It still absolutely baffles me to this day. Who, between the hours of 2 a.m. and 8 a.m., noticed my car parked on a crappy street in the London suburbs, saw that it didn't have a left wiper as of that very evening, and then replaced it with a back wiper they just happened to have? Earlier today, my significant other was having difficulties setting up and using a new tablet. I attempted to help, and began running into the same issues with the setup. The setup program kept telling us to insert the SIM, but it was inserted. After fiddling with it for several minutes, I realized the SIM tray is designed with 2 SIM slots, but the way the two are designed, it's not easily recognizable. So I began switching the SIM card over to the other slot in the tray, and shifted a little into better lighting to make sure I was getting the edges into the tray correctly. As I did, both the SIM and the tray flipped out of my fingers. The tray landed on the bed beside me while I watched the SIM card hit the floor and bounce under my nightstand. I got up, moved the nightstand, and found absolutely nothing. For 15 minutes, my SO and I looked under the bed, pillows, blankets, both nightstands, etc., and the SIM card was just gone. It had glitched out of existence. I finally even spoke that truth aloud, and we both gave up the search. Mind you, we just recently moved in here, and there is little in our room as we just finished painting and putting new flooring in. We haven't even started moving our clothes into the bedroom yet. Leaving the room, we both go work in the kitchen for a few hours painting and installing new cabinets and counters. Stopping to take a break, we both walk into the bedroom together when my SO, who was walking in front of me, stops suddenly exclaiming, "There it is." Confused, I ask, "There what is?" To which my SO just pointed to the floor at the large open space between the foot of our bed and the dresser. The white SIM card had reappeared, in an area opposite of the direction we had both seen it go earlier, and in an area that we both had traversed several times looking for it earlier, and in an area where the white SIM card showed up very easily and noticeably against the charcoal gray coloring of the new flooring. My SO says, "There's no way that was there earlier." And I just shrug, replying, "Well, just be grateful it glitched back and we don't have to buy another one. I hope you had your fun on your little vacay out of our reality, little SIM card. Now, just please work like you're supposed to, without issues." I started sewing in 2020. Being a newbie, I thrift as much as I can. Fabric and sewing patterns are dirt cheap at my local thrift shop. As is true for anything at thrift stores, you're at the whim of whatever someone else donates. For those unfamiliar with how sewing patterns work, they come with a blueprint for the garment, plus step-by-step instructions on how to put it together. I organize all of my patterns in a canvas bin underneath my desk. So, I'm painting my office last month, moving things from one side of the room to the other so that I don't have to clear the whole office out. I push my dresser away from the wall and see that there were sewing instructions covered in dust underneath it. As I go to pick it up, I'm wondering how long it's been there. But then I see the front of it, and I'm instantly flummoxed. I've never seen this pattern before. I have never owned this pattern. I'm a nerd and have a spreadsheet of my patterns, and it is not on it. I go through all my physical patterns, and it's not there either. Still perplexed, I put it in my pattern bin because my brain is dumb and my thought process is, what if I need it someday? Fast forward to last week, I'm rummaging around at Value Village looking for patterns that were printed in this millennium, and literally freeze in my tracks. I found the exact same pattern. There are literally thousands of patterns out there. This rack had like 40 of them on it, and this was one of them. Of course I bought it. Before we get too excited, this one had its instructions included, so now I have 2 instruction pamphlets for this pattern. Can anyone explain how this happened? It's strange enough to find this orphaned instruction, but I think it's doubly strange that I found the pattern for it a month later. I live just outside of a big city in the UK, and I get the bus all the time from my house to the center of town. There are a few different buses that go to my area, but only 2 that drop me off right outside of my house. That being the number 12 and the number 13. And occasionally the number 12A as well. I was waiting for a bus to take me home from town the other night, and I saw the number 12 approaching. Excellent, I thought to myself, because it's got a shorter route than the number 13. So I got on and sat down. Now, I've caught the bus hundreds and hundreds of times, so I know the route blindfolded. And I could tell that we were not driving the way the number 12 usually goes. However, it also wasn't the route the number 13, nor the number 12A goes either. We were driving through a part of town that I don't recognize. I'm freaking out, thinking that I must have seen the wrong number and gotten on the wrong bus. So I look out the window and try to see what services are listed on the bus stops that we pass. I see number 49, number 23, and number 24. Bollocks, I've definitely gotten on the wrong bus, I think to myself. I shout over to the only other person riding the bus and ask him what bus this is, and he yells that it's the number 13, which confuses me even more. Sure enough, we eventually end up on the route the number 13 takes, and I get home. When the bus leaves, I look, and it is indeed the number 13. I can't stop thinking about that ride, as it freaks me out how I can't explain what I saw and what happened. I can understand misreading the bus number, even though I distinctly remember thinking about how the 12 was faster than the 13, but the route being wrong, and the signs confirming it, baffles me. When I lived in my old apartment in the Midwest, the rent was unbelievably cheap for the size. 2 spacious rooms and a bathroom for less than $1,000 a month. Most days, life went on as usual, but there was one incident that still baffles me to this day. It was a sunny afternoon, and I decided to tackle the ever-growing pile of dishes in my sink. I reached for the blue dish soap bottle, a familiar container, and I was about to use it, when something inexplicable happened. The bottle vanished into thin air, right before my eyes. I couldn't believe it. I stood there staring at the empty spot on the counter where the blue bottle had been just a moment ago. I checked the immediate surroundings, thinking maybe it had fallen or rolled away, but it was nowhere to be found. Puzzled and somewhat frustrated, I searched the entire apartment, even places where the bottle had no reason to be, but it had seemingly disappeared from existence. Defeated and utterly perplexed, I returned to the kitchen and glanced back at the sink. And there it was, as if nothing had ever happened. The blue dish soap bottle neatly placed next to the sink. My mind raced with confusion and disbelief. Had I imagined the entire incident? Or had I experienced a brief glitch in the fabric of reality? The strangest part was that it wasn't just the bottle that had vanished. It was as if the memory of it had vanished too, leaving me questioning if I had run out of soap or just forgotten to buy more, even though I was certain it was supposed to be there all along. It felt like a surreal moment, where the boundaries of reality blurred, leaving me with a lingering sense that perhaps there are aspects of our world that defy logic and reason, hidden just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. About 10 years back, while I was living in San Francisco, me and my roommates drove to Hayward to go watch a movie with a friend of ours who lived in Hayward. To get to Hayward from San Francisco, you have to cross the San Mateo Bridge. I've driven that bridge what feels like a million times, so I'm super familiar with how long it takes to get across it. It was a later movie, and we didn't get out until a few minutes before midnight. We said our goodbyes and started driving back home to the city. We're on the San Mateo Bridge and my roommate was driving. It was late, and I was just enjoying the radio while we drove, super content and relaxed. I then suddenly had this deep feeling that we'd been driving for a very long time. Too long. Like it felt like we'd been driving for hours. There weren't very many cars on the bridge at that hour either, and I surveyed my surroundings. The bridge just stretched on before us. Suddenly, my roommate spoke up and asked me if it felt like we'd been driving for way too long on the bridge, and my stomach sank. We turned the radio off, and I swear to you, the clock said 1:20 a.m. We'd somehow been driving on that bridge for over an hour. We freaked out and became hyper-vigilant. I told my roommate who was driving to just stay calm and that I'm sure we would be off the bridge soon. And sure enough, the hill on the bridge came up that you drive over to get off the bridge, and into Foster City. We sped home to our townhome at like 90 miles per hour after we'd gotten off the bridge. And that bridge does not take over an hour to get across. I truly feel like we'd gotten stuck in some time loop on that bridge crossing the bay. And when we finally realized it was happening, we snapped out of it. And no, we didn't drink or do any drugs. Has this happened to anyone else? Maybe even on the same bridge? Last night, I was listening to music with my phone in my hand momentarily. I'm vibing, and I go to put it down on the bed near where my head lays when I sleep. I grab my water bottle off the floor and turn around to hear something crash. I turn around and my phone is now under my bed. I know the only explanation to this would be that it slipped through the cracks at the beginning of my bed, but I didn't put my phone that close to the crack, so it wouldn't fall. I had to raise my mattress to grab it, and I rest my phone on the crack only to see that it doesn't even fit through. Not only that, but I remember how I laid it, and did it again. There's no slope, no nothing, it's just flat. So, I was very creeped out. I forgot about it though until today. I was in the bathroom, using its usual stuff, but at the end, my other phone, I have two, was resting on the tub, and the other one, the phone that dropped the previous night, was on my other side on the counter, because I wasn't using it at the moment. I finished using the bathroom, and I specifically remember standing up to put my pants on. I had not touched the toilet. I picked up my phone that was on the tub, And I remember thinking that I didn't even want to do that without washing my hands. And I put it in my pocket. I took my other phone and my AirPods and put them in my other pocket and go to the sink. I wash my hands and look over, and realize the toilet seat is now down. Now I'm just trying to remember when I even did that. There was no reason for me to let the lid down since I had already flushed before getting up. After I was done washing my hands, I took an alcohol wipe to wipe my phone and things down. I'm still confused, and now I kind of think I'm going crazy. Both times it happened when I was listening to music. I don't drink and I don't smoke, so I wasn't high or anything like that. I recently got myself a pair of Bose headphones, and I loved them right from the first time that I put them on. I use these headphones for my workouts, phone calls, and whenever I just want to chill out. So you can imagine how bummed out I was when, 3 days ago, I couldn't find them. Here's what happened. I remember using the headphones to listen to a podcast while I was working out in the garage. At one point, I took them off and went inside the house to grab a drink. After finishing my workout, I didn't think about the headphones again until later in the day, when I went back to the garage. They were nowhere to be found. I spent the next 3 days searching high and low. My wife and I turned the garage upside down, checking the squat rack multiple times. We even tore through the whole house, but I was pretty sure that I hadn't brought them back inside. I was ready to throw in the towel because I couldn't think of anywhere else to look. But now, let's jump to today. I was working out in the garage again, and as I walked out to the driveway to cool down, something unbelievable happened. At the same time, my daughter, who had been helping us look for the headphones, walked into the garage to grab her soccer ball. Suddenly she said, "Oh, you found them." Confused, I asked, "Found what?" She then showed me the headphones, and I got a shiver down my spine when I saw them hanging right there on the side of the squat rack. I'd been working out for 45 minutes, and there is no way that I could have missed them. My wife and I had searched that rack over and over. I called my wife into the garage, and she couldn't believe her eyes either. It felt like a prank because the headphones were in such an obvious spot. Even my daughter thought that I found them when she first saw them. She couldn't have been pranking me because I saw her walk into the garage, and she didn't have anything in her hands. She's also not the type to play tricks. All three of us are freaked out because we still cannot explain how they magically reappeared. About 6 years ago, 2 years after my grandmother passed away, I had this experience that I still can't explain. Before she passed, she left me 2 rings. I wore them every day. About a year after she passed, I lost the rings. I mean fully, completely lost. I tore my room, car, everything apart. Truly believe that I was thorough. My mom came to visit one weekend, deep cleaned my room and bathroom. I lived in my brother's basement for a bit. And that was that. So, fast forward a year after I had lost the rings, I was listening to a podcast, and this woman was talking about how she said goodbye to her mother, as she wasn't able to say goodbye before her mother passed. She did so by getting on a boat and tossing her beloved necklace into the water, because it wasn't about the necklace. She had to let go to say goodbye on her terms. I cried and cried, and I spoke out loud and told my grandma that I'm letting the rings go. It's about my love for her and what she gave me that had nothing to do with the rings. I accepted the rings were gone. When I got home that night, I took a shower and I placed something on my bathroom shelf, hit this vase, and the rings were there. Not hidden, just sitting there on the shelf. When I tell you my heart dropped and began pounding, I mean that my core was totally shaken. I'm completely confused. I looked there, and I looked good. When I told my mom what happened, she immediately said, "I cleaned your bathroom. I didn't see those rings." I'm not sure why I feel this is important to mention, but the rings belonged to my paternal grandmother. So there's no part of my mom that would inform this hope or belief that this was a sign or message. Also, we are Mexican. And when my mama cleans, she doesn't miss stuff. She's also a skeptic, and was shocked with what I had told her. All to say, when I tell my boyfriend, now husband, what happened, the first thing he said was, "It's a glitch in the Matrix." I work back of house at Olive Garden, and this one particular day I was the bread person. It was a busy day, so in preparation, this nice woman, no name to protect identity, who had been here forever, was helping me fill the rack with bread before she left for the day. So we fill it completely full, but a couple of minutes later, when a server takes the already buttered and salted bread that we have ready, notes this was in addition to the full rack, and there were 2 trays worth in the container, I turn around to put 2 top trays in the oven. But I stop because I noticed that, for some reason, 1 tray is missing from the middle. Okay, so maybe someone put it in the oven and I missed it. Sometimes the servers will help out. I checked both the top and bottom oven. Nothing. I asked the lady that was helping me fill the rack, did someone take a tray from the middle? And she said it was full a minute ago. I asked the server currently taking our prepared bread if she saw someone take a tray, but no, nothing. The oven directly behind me is the only oven that bread gets baked in. Now, I do have sleep issues, that's issues with quality of sleep, but the lady that was helping me on bread is very attentive to detail, so there's no way that we both would have missed it. Also, no one ever takes unbaked trays of bread, except for to put it in the oven directly behind me. So this just makes no sense to me. I only asked the server to rule it out. I also rotate my bread in a specific way. I take from the top and move the bread up from the bottom. I don't currently have a carbon monoxide detector in my house, but because of this subreddit, I kind of panicked and called the gas company, and they came out recently and nothing was wrong. I want to add that they added that detail because that's a common statement made by commenters on the subreddit. Anyways, I also don't think that anyone would be able to steal a full tray of bread, even if they wanted to, because you can't even tilt it sideways without it falling down. I never figured out what happened that day, but if you guys can think of anything that I missed to rule out, let me know.